Chapter 683. Yu Miao's summer villa was located on Mount Hanyu outside Zhongning City. A few palaces built of pitch-black boulders lay between the mountain streams like monsters, connected by small paths. Wild ducks could be seen swimming in the gurgling stream, giving the place an elegant charm that was rarely seen in Diyu. Amidst the trees and rocks, guards clad in tight black leather armors were crouching in dark corners like venomous snakes, glancing around vigilantly with gloomy and deep eyes. From time to time, a thin layer of gray mist would gush out from between the rocks, and vague figures could be seen twisting and flashing in the mist. With the power of the mist, these Yin ghosts were fearless of the scorching sun, and could show themselves in broad daylight, walking leisurely between the mountains. If an outsider invaded the woods, these Yin ghosts would either let out a warning howl, or pounce on the intruder and suck his blood essence dry. In the grass beside the paths, a large number of venomous snakes and insects were wriggling. These venomous snakes and insects were the ferocious species carefully selected by the Yu clan in Zhong province, and fed with curses and poisons, which made them extremely vicious. Even an immortal would be in danger of dying if bitten by these venomous snakes and insects. Among them, the few kings of snakes and insects were demons that the Yu clan had been raising for countless years, and their venom could even kill a gold immortal. There was a cliff in the mountains, and a stream of white water was shooting out from a hole on the cliff that was tens of feet in diameter. The water was about 10 feet thick, and it was flowing rapidly like a flood dragon, producing a deep, muffled roar that sounded like thunder. Dozens of burly men clad in heavy armors and emanating a lifeless aura stood on both sides of the stream, their grayish-white eyes looking around blankly like dead fish. Meanwhile, a few oracles with the pattern of 9 moons embroidered on their sleeves were sitting on the rocks by the water with their legs crossed, chatting with each other. After entering the hole and walking along the stream of white water for a few miles, the water would sink into the ground, and there would be a hole emitting a cold air right next to it. After entering the hole and walking down for tens of miles, they would come to a cave abode made of cold jade. The cave abode, about a mile in circumference, was made entirely of a piece of 10,000-year-old cold jade, emanating a cold air that could freeze metal weapons and armors to pieces. The white jade was almost translucent, and dazzling gleams shot out of it like blades and swords, making it impossible for ordinary people to look at it directly. In the middle of the cave abode was a blue xianbing bed. Yu Miao, whose legs were bitten off by Ao Buzan, was lying naked on the bed, gritting his teeth as he underwent surgery from an elder of his clan. The xianbing bed was excavated by the ancestors of Yu clan from a dangerous place in some outer heavenly realm. The temperature of the xianbing was extremely low, and any ordinary immortal item would be frozen and cracked if it were touched by the cold air emanating from the xianbing. If not for Yu Miao's cultivation base, which was comparable to a gold immortal, and the fact that he had taken a lot of rare herbs to protect his heart meridians and body, he would have been frozen into a zombie by now. A dozen elders of the Yu clan in Zhong province sat around Yu Miao, their eyes fixed on the elder, who was the oldest and most senior in Yu clan, and had not shown himself for many years, performing the operation on Yu Miao. The elder stood about 10 feet tall, and his body was withered and shriveled like a mummy. Only his hands were crystal clear, snow-white, and delicate, as if they were carved from jade. No hands of a peerless beauty could compare to the breathtaking beauty of his opponent. It was as if all his spirit, energy, and soul had been gathered in his palms, and when he moved his fingers, wisps of jade light would accompany them. Holding a jade dagger, a jade needle, and a roll of unknown transparent thread, the elder quickly sewed up Yu Miao's nerves, blood vessels, and meridians, connecting the 2 plump thighs to him. In a corner of the cave abode, a handsome young man was lying on the ground with his eyes wide open. There was a crack between his brows, and it was the wound that went straight into his head that killed him. His legs had been taken away by someone, and were now being attached to Yu Miao's body. The blood that flowed out of the young man's cracked skull was golden in color, mixed with a hint of purple energy. It was the purple energy of immortal blood that only a gold immortal could have. He was at least an 18th tier gold immortal. But now, he was lying on the ground, dead like any other mortal. A crisp cracking sound rang out as the elder's jade knife cut through a transparent thread. After completing all the operations, he grabbed a fist-sized medicine jar from a jade table next to Xian Bing's bed, carefully dug out some pale green ointment with his fingers, and applied it to the stitches on Yu Miao's limbs. Wherever the ointment touched, the stitches healed quickly. Yu Miao let out a deep cry of pain as the ghost blood in his body gradually flowed into the new blood vessels in his thighs, gradually transforming the remaining gold immortal blood in them. The two different types of blood devoured and fused with each other, and the excruciating pain made him feel as if someone was grinding his legs inch by inch with a millstone. The indescribable pain made Yu Mu's face twist. Gritting his teeth, he straightened his upper body and bowed respectfully to the secluded elder. "Great-grandfather, thank you for your help this time. We are really useless. How could we let a lowly man bully us?" he said. Casually, the elder put away the jade knife, jade needle, and thread into his sleeve. "It doesn't matter," he said coolly. "There are bound to be a few times in one's life when one is deceived and taken advantage of. You only had your legs broken. Back then, hee." Laughing strangely, the elder shook his head, turned, and walked into the depths of the cave abode, ignoring Yu Miao and the other elders of Yu clan in Zhong province. Yu Miao exchanged a glance with the elders around him. He knew what the elder was going to say. Years ago, when the Yu clan in Zhong province underwent a great upheaval, the Yu clan in Liangzhu had reached out to take control of the power of the Yu clan in Zhong province, and had sent Yu Miao to Zhong province to seize the position of clan leader. The elder fought with Yu Miao, and as a result, he was severely wounded by the man sent by the Yu clan in Liangzhu, with all his internal organs crushed into meat paste. Fortunately, the ghost god worshipped by the elder had the power to bring the dead back to life. Yu Miao and the others had secretly held a blood sacrifice, and the ghost god had saved the elder's life. Even so, the elder had to lie in bed for decades before he could move again, and over the years, he had been cultivating in seclusion in Mount Hanyu, never going out to meet anyone. The crowd exchanged glances, and Yu Miao cried out in a low voice, "Yu Lei is dead, and I've lost another son." The faces of the elders of Yu clan were 3 inches longer than a donkey's, and there was a hint of complaint in their eyes as they looked at Yu Miao. "You Miao, have only lost one son. In any case, you have many sons, and countless grandchildren. You just need to have a few more sons." But, in order to give Wu Qi the so-called cover-up fee, under the joint pressure of Yu Miao and Wu Qi, all the elders present had taken out a lot of gold and silver, and lost countless natural treasures. A son was nothing more than a concubine, something that could be obtained with a shiver. But, the gold and silver, as well as the natural treasures, were accumulated by these elders bit by bit. It only took them a moment to make a son, but it took them thousands of years of hard work to accumulate so much wealth. But, in the end, because Yu Miao's son insulted King Yang Qiu, they had to give away all their wealth. Despite the resentment in their hearts, none of the elders said a word. It was a personal grudge between Yu Miao and Wu Qi, but it had harmed the interests of these elders, and they would not support Yu Miao unconditionally. If it were not for the fact that they needed Yu Miao to take the lead in competing with Yu Miao for the power of the clan, they would not care about Yu Miao's life and death. But now, Yu Miao had seized on Yu Miao's mistake and was determined to strip him of his position as the left minister of the Directorate of Celestials. Whether these elders would still support Yu Miao would depend on the situation. Yu Miao instantly understood what these elders were thinking, and it was undoubtedly a great threat to him. Without the support of these elders of Yu clan in Zhong province, with Yu Miao's overall strength, it was very likely that he would be tortured by Yu Miao within 3 to 5 years. Yu Miao cleared his throat and said in a deep voice, "I'll make up for your loss with the properties under my name." After calculating the properties under Yu Miao's name, the few elders shook their heads at the same time. Yu Miao's current net worth was not enough to make up for the loss of a dozen elders present. Yu Miao understood what these elders were thinking. He reached out his hand and grabbed a scroll out of thin air, then threw it to the nearest elder. "These are the mineral veins I've secretly developed over the past 300 years, as well as the immortal markets I've opened in other provinces. There should be enough for you to divide among yourselves." The elders of Yu clan leaned over and carefully read the many properties recorded on the scroll. Then, they could not help but gasp at the same time. As the elders of Yu clan, they had violated the Yu's ban by secretly mining some immortal stones and energy stone veins, and secretly selling some rare metals and spirit herbs. They had more or less colluded with those immortals. But this was the first time they had seen someone like Yu Miao, who had mined hundreds of immortal stones and energy stone veins and opened more than 200 immortal markets of different sizes. But it was true that if these properties were distributed equally, it would be more than enough to make up for the loss of the elders. The elders looked at Yu Miao calmly, their faces once again wearing a slightly respectful smile that Yu Miao was familiar with. Yu Miao nodded with satisfaction and said in a deep voice, "I won't rest until Tan Lang is dead. But he is now King Yangqiu's personal guard. If we assassinate him again, I'm afraid that His Highness..." He paused for a moment, then frowned and continued, "Besides, with my cultivation base, I can't divine his exact whereabouts. Yu Miao must have done something to him." The elders turned to look at Yu Miao at the same time, wondering how he was going to solve the problem. Wu Qi had King Yangqiu's support, and if they killed Wu Qi, they would probably offend King Yangqiu. But if they continued to kill Wu Qi, they would probably have to face Yu Miao directly. With Yu Miao's cultivation base, he could kill so many elders without leaving any traces behind. Yu Miao gave a wry smile and sighed. "This is a personal grudge between me and that guy. Let me deal with it alone." Gritting his teeth, he said in a deep voice, "To tell you the truth, I'm going to hire immortals to assassinate him at a high price." The elders were startled, and then they burst into laughter at the same time. Obviously, hiring immortals to assassinate Wu Qi at a high price was the best way to do it. They exchanged a glance and nodded at the same time. Now that the war was in chaos, the death of Wu Qi was not a big deal. One of the elders hesitated for a moment, then suddenly asked in a low voice, "In that case, why don't we pay a high price and get Yu Miao?" The corner of Yu Miao's mouth curved into a smile. Chapter 684. It was a nameless mountain range at the border of Mingu Province and a 6th-grade province under the jurisdiction of Zhong Province. Hundreds of years ago, the Directorate of Celestials of Zhong Province had designated this nameless mountain range as a testing ground for some new oracles who had just joined the Directorate of Celestials. Here, they would conduct some strange magic spells and sacrificial rituals, and even let the new oracles fight with powerful demon beasts. Therefore, it had been a very long time since anyone had entered this nameless mountain range. If one were to walk in this mountain range, one might be possessed by a ghost who had missed an experiment and have his blood essence and soul taken away. If one accidentally heard someone calling one's name and answered casually, one might have his soul sucked away. If one drank a mouthful of water from a stream, perhaps some oracles who specialized in poisons from the Directorate of Celestials had poisoned it before, and a mouthful of water could kill tens of thousands of people. It was a dangerous place, a barren place with few resources, and a place that neither Mingu Province nor Zhong Province would pay attention to. It was frequented by new oracles from Zhong Province's Directorate of Celestials all year round. Not to mention immortals and itinerant cultivators, even some little demon beasts who had just gained sentience and learned how to absorb natural energy to cultivate were all killed. Therefore, there was nothing worth paying attention to in this mountain range, which was millions of miles in circumference. But, as the saying goes, it is darkest under the lamp. An itinerant heaven immortal named Immortal Gord had colluded with a group of itinerant cultivators and built a large immortal market in this nameless mountain range. After hundreds of years of development, because of the protection of the oracles from Zhong Province's Directorate of Celestials, and the fact that Immortal Gord was extremely cautious, the market had developed into the largest, safest, and most secretive immortal market in both Zhong Province and Mingu Province. But, the market had strict rules and extremely complicated safety regulations. Immortals who entered and left the market could only be introduced by an absolutely reliable acquaintance through the teleportation formations set up everywhere. So far, no outsider had ever found out where the Gord Immortal Market was located in this mountain range, and no one had ever found out who was the power behind it. 500 miles underground under an unknown mountain, there was a naturally formed karst cave shaped like a gourd. It was where the Gord Immortal Market was located. The natural calabash-shaped cave was 300 miles long. The smaller part of the calabash had a diameter of 130 miles, while the larger part had a diameter of 270 miles. Countless shops floated in the huge gourd-shaped space, divided into 9 distinct levels from top to bottom. The shops on the top floor were all tall and magnificent palace-like buildings. These buildings were all opened by the most powerful immortal alliances and cultivation clans in Zhong Province and Mingu Province. One of them, with a radius of 4 miles, was the most gorgeous and luxurious shop with 9 entrances. It was none other than the Myriad Immortal Palace, which was opened in the Gourd Immortal Market by the Union of Myriad Immortals. It mainly sold all kinds of flying swords and magical artifacts, as well as medicinal pills and talismans. At the same time, it purchased all valuable natural treasures. From the top to the bottom, the size and specifications of the shops were reduced. The shops at the lowest level were simply some 2- or 3-storied small buildings made of green bricks and green tiles. These shops were the strongholds of some small itinerant cultivator forces. They did some small business to exchange for some energy stones for their cultivation. Occasionally, they would be lucky enough to receive some valuable natural treasures, which they would immediately send to the shops opened by major forces such as Myriad Immortal Palace in exchange for a large amount of energy stones and immortal stones. There were more than 7,000 shops run by these small powers in the entire Gourd Immortal Market. The vast space was divided into 9 floors, and each floor was separated by streets condensed from clouds and mist. The space between the shops was extremely vast, and with all kinds of complicated restrictive and defensive formations, it could protect the privacy of the customers who came to the Gourd Immortal Market very well. Immortal Gourd, who controlled the entire Gourd Immortal Market, had spent a great deal of effort and money to build this place. He had actually obtained hundreds of huge stone pillars from the Directorate of Celestials and erected them on the streets. Dazzling green light filled the entire cave, and no one with stealth or escape art could hide in the light. Connected to the spirit fire in the earth veins, these stone pillars formed a powerful earth fire array. If anyone dared to cause trouble in the Gourd Immortal Market, the green fire spewed out from the hundreds of giant stone pillars was enough to melt an ordinary gold immortal. With such strict protection, there had never been any accidents since the establishment of the Gourd Immortal Market. Lu Buwei was sitting in the backyard of a small palace on the 3rd floor of Gourd Immortal Market, flipping through the thick account book in front of him with his fingers. While mentally calculating all the inflow and outflow of this month, he was jotting down lines of numbers in another account book. Gradually, a complacent smile appeared on Lu Buwei's face. Shaking his head and humming a little tune, he wrote down the last few numbers in the account book with satisfaction. In just a few years, after being seriously wounded and fleeing from the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean, Lu Buwei had wandered to Panga continent. But, with his means and ability, it did not take him long to sneak into the Gourd Immortal Market. First, he took shelter as the manager of an ordinary shop. After spending a year recuperating from his injury, he immediately killed the shop owner and his whole family, took their souls, and reformed them into heavenly ghosts. With his business skills, Lu Buwei had established a business in the Gourd Immortal Market in just a few years. He had expanded from a medium-sized shop on the 7th level to a large chamber of commerce on the 3rd level of the market. Now, Lu Buwei's spring and autumn trading had hundreds of employees, including dozens of heaven immortals. The monthly income of energy stones and immortal stones was astronomical. In the past few years, the Lu clan, who stayed in outer heavenly realms, had also sent a large number of elites to Panga continent. Lu Buwei had also summoned his clan members and asked them to set up shops in Gourd Immortal Market, while running various businesses outside. On the surface, Lu Buwei only had one shop, spring and autumn trading, but in fact, there were as many as 18 large trading houses controlled by his clan in Gourd Immortal Market alone. These 18 trading houses were originally owned by the itinerant cultivator clans on Panga continent, but Lu Buwei had gradually infiltrated and eroded their strength with various shady means. Now, of the 5,000 people in these clans, only about 1,000 were left, and their souls had been imprisoned by Lu Buwei, making them all slaves and lackeys of the clan. Lu Buwei's ability to rebuild such a large business in such a short time was truly amazing. After checking the account book of this month's income, Lu Buwei opened the door of the secret chamber and stored the account book inside. After that, he admired the mountains of immortal stones and other rare treasures in the chamber, and Lu Buwei laughed heartily for a while. Because he was in a good mood, after leaving the secret chamber, Lu Buwei went to his bedroom, where he ordered a few juniors to bring him a few girls who had been abducted yesterday, and gave them a good time. These girls were all stunning beauties, and they had all been abducted from their clans and sold as slaves by slave traders among the immortals and itinerant cultivators. As Lu Buwei was very interested in female charms, he immediately bought these few girls and kept them as his private property. Today was the first time he had taken care of these unfortunate girls. After torturing these girls to his heart's content and robbing them of their chastity in the most brutal way possible, Lu Buwei, who was in a better mood, took a shower and dressed up like a rich old official, swaggered into the main hall of the spring and autumn trading house, eagerly attending to the guests. The chief manager, second manager, and third manager in the lobby were all Lu Buwei's descendants. When they saw Lu Buwei personally attending to the customers in the lobby, these managers and workers worked very hard, trying their best to attract customers with the best attitude, lest Lu Buwei would find out about their mistakes. Spring and autumn enterprises' luck was quite good today. In just a quarter of an hour after Lu Buwei personally took charge of the main hall, more than a dozen loose cultivators had come to sell the spirit herbs they had gathered. Among them, there were a few extremely valuable herbs. Lu Buwei gladly gave these itinerant cultivators a good price and bought all the spirit herbs. Among them, the price of a violet dragon blood fruit alone was 100,000 times more than all the energy stones he had paid. The violet dragon blood fruit was an upper-grade medicinal ingredient that could be used to concoct gold immortal pills, and Lu Buwei had bought it and a few other spirit herbs of similar grade at the price of a mid-grade heaven immortal pill. Lu Buwei had made a great profit from this transaction. Just as Lu Buwei was about to return to the backyard with a few spirit herbs in his hands, Patriarch Yuan Hua, with a gloomy face, followed an itinerant heaven immortal cultivator and walked slowly through the front door of spring and autumn trading. Lu Buwei's body suddenly trembled. He took a deep breath and couldn't help but mutter to himself, "Why is this blood energy so dense? TSK, it will bring great benefits to my heavenly ghost grand magic." Patriarch Yuan Hua shuddered as well. He stopped and turned to look at Lu Buwei, then arched his brows in astonishment and said, "Someone has actually formed the body of a heavenly ghost? He, if my blood sea is guarded by tens of thousands of heavenly ghosts from outer heavenly domains, its power will increase by more than 100 times. Especially my blood-draining ghost flag, I need a lot of fiends and heavenly ghosts in it. I was worried that I did not have a place to find heavenly ghosts." Separated by a distance of hundreds of feet, Lu Buwei and Patriarch Yuan Hua looked at each other from a distance. Their eyes flickered and flickered, showing their deep friendship. After the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Lu Buwei put down the herbs in his hand and hurried out of the door. He cupped his fist and bowed to Patriarch Yuan Hua. "Please forgive me for not going out to meet you, honorable guests." Patriarch Yuan Hua grinned and said, "It is fate that brings us together. If fellow Taoists can work together with me in cultivation, it will bring great benefits to both you and me. Ha ha ha, the blood sea grand magic and the boundless heavenly ghosts will bring both our great Daos." After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Yuan Hua nodded reservedly and said, "If fellow Taoist can acknowledge me as your master, I'll teach you all the secrets of the blood sea. What do you think?" Cultivating the blood sea grand magic with the body of a heavenly ghost was an excellent aptitude. As Patriarch Yuan Hua was all alone now, he really wanted to take in a few disciples. Patriarch Yuan Hua knew very well that if he wanted to make a living in the world of cultivators, how could he not have a few disciples? Acknowledge Patriarch Yuan Hua as his master. Lu Buwei frowned. No matter what, he was the leader of a clan, and he was an ambitious and ruthless man. How could he acknowledge someone as his master so easily? Patriarch Yuan Hua did not say anything. He smiled faintly and unleashed his blood and energy, unleashing an enormous pressure that forced Lu Buwei to take a few steps back. Lu Buwei looked at Patriarch Yuan Hua with surprise and delight, then quickly bowed and said, "That's great. But, Senior, please come in and have a chat. Patriarch Yuanhua laughed. Ignoring the itinerant heaven immortal who brought him into Gourd Immortal Market, he strode into spring and autumn trading. Chapter 685. Patriarch Yuanhua and Lu Buwei sat opposite each other in a secret chamber in the backyard of spring and autumn trading. The chamber was simply furnished, consisting of a bed, 2 hassocks, and an incense burner shaped like a mountain in the middle of the chamber. The warm fragrance coming out of it made one feel warm all over, but once inhaled, it would turn into a stream of cold spring water that flowed through one's body, stimulating one's spirit and having the effect of driving away evil spirits. A faint blood-red light could be seen drifting beneath Patriarch Yuanhua's body, and a plume of blood energy rose from the top of his head, forming a cloud platform 30 feet in circumference. 3 blood-colored lotus flowers the size of water tanks were bobbing up and down. There were 18 lotus thrones in the middle of the 3 blood-colored lotus flowers, but they were empty. These were the Dharma thrones of the blood-draining fiends that Patriarch Yuanhua had learned from the Blood Sea Grand Magic. On each of these lotus thrones should be a blood fiend cultivated from the blood essence and souls of hundreds of millions of living beings. When Lord Blood Ocean was at his peak, the weakest of the 18 blood-draining fiends he had condensed had the cultivation base of a 9th-tier primordial immortal. When they joined forces, he even dared to break into the celestial court alone and abduct the fairies serving the great celestial emperor. But now, Lord Blood Ocean was only left with a broken wisp of his true spirit and had fused with Patriarch Yuanhua. Although all the Blood Sea Grand Magic scriptures had been passed down, no one knew who killed him, nor did they know the origin of that ancient celestial fiend, Li Shuezi, or the relationship between him and Lord Blood Ocean. Naturally, these 18 blood-draining fiends were gone, and Patriarch Yuanhua had to work hard to condense them. If he were to condense them out of thin air, the amount of blood essence and souls consumed would be astronomical, and the energy and mental strength consumed would be terrifying. But, if he could get 18 heavenly ghosts who had achieved a certain level of cultivation base, let them devour a large amount of their own blood essence and souls, and then refine them into incorporeal bodies in the blood sea fiend flame, he could save a lot of time and condense them into blood-draining fiends. More importantly, the blood-draining fiends refined from heavenly ghosts would have the ability to travel through the void, and when used together with the Blood Sea Grand Magic, their power would be increased by 100 times. If he could obtain the strongest undead heavenly ghost king in Ghost Domain and use it as the true form of the blood fiend, the mere thought of its power was enough to drive Patriarch Yuanhua crazy. Patriarch Yuanhua focused his mind and circulated his energy, slowly explaining the secret of Blood Sea Grand Magic word by word. Every time he uttered a word, a thumb-sized blood-colored lotus flower would fall from the blood cloud above his head. As soon as the blood-colored lotus landed on Lu Buwei, it immediately melted into his body, transforming into a stream of pure magical power that circulated through his entire body and quickly fused with his immortal soul. Lu Buwei felt like he was floating in the air. The blood in his body was getting thicker and thicker, and the magic power contained in his blood was getting stronger and stronger. His blood flowed faster and faster, and gradually, his blood vessels swelled. Blood surged in his blood vessels like raging dragons. The surging sound of blood echoed in the secret room, even making the Zhangtal bronze censer buzzing in the middle of the room. Just by inheriting Patriarch Yuanhua's foundational cultivation technique of Blood Sea Grand Magic, Lu Buwei had already sensed the tremendous benefits it brought. In order to win over Lu Buwei's heart, Patriarch Yuanhua had not hesitated to use his prime blood energy to impart his cultivation technique to Lu Buwei. As a result, Lu Buwei had already formed the body of a heavenly ghost, and he had a wisp of the aura of the indestructible body of heavenly ghosts. With Patriarch Yuanhua's help, Lu Buwei felt as if his body was on fire. Hot air billowed around him, and an endless power was growing inside him. Gradually, he had an impulse that he could shatter the stars and overturn the earth with just one punch. Originally, Lu Buwei's cultivation base was not very high. But, as Patriarch Yuanhua imparted his cultivation technique to him, his cultivation base was soaring at a tremendous rate. The Blood Sea Grand Magic was bizarre and evil, and there was no limit to one's cultivation base. When one's cultivation base grew stronger, the sea of blood would grow larger, and so would one's cultivation base. All the magic power was stored in the Sea of Blood, and it had nothing to do with the cultivator's true form. When one attained the mastery of the Blood Sea Grand Magic, one's fleshly body and the Sea of Blood would merge into one. Then, one would only need to crazily extract the blood essence and souls of living beings to conjure the myriad spirits' blood pool. With that, one would be able to rapidly improve their magic power, just like what Patriarch Yuan Hua had done on Myriad Immortals' planet. If one could gather the blood essence and souls of trillions of living beings to conjure the myriad spirits' blood pool at the same time, and then completely absorb it with one's own sea of blood, one would be able to step into the realm of primordial in just one day. Patriarch Yuan Hua kept teaching Lu Buwei the various essences and wonders of the Blood Sea Grand Magic. Lu Buwei was so happy that he almost burst out laughing. Respectfully, he learned all the secrets of the Blood Sea Grand Magic from Patriarch Yuan Hua. When Patriarch Yuan Hua put away the Sea of Blood and the blood-colored lotus, Lu Buwei did not need any more words from Patriarch Yuan Hua. He leaped off the cloud bed, dropped to his knees respectfully, and kowtowed to Patriarch Yuan Hua. Master, I, Lu Buwei, am fated to be your disciple. I will definitely be filial to Master with all my heart, and do my best to develop our sect. Lu Buwei's eyes narrowed into slits as he smiled. Patriarch Yuan Hua was obviously a formidable immortal, and with his support, Lu Buwei's life on Panga continent would be much better. Patriarch Yuan Hua nodded with satisfaction. With Lu Buwei, a disciple who was obviously rich and had many juniors, he would be able to rebuild Yuan Hua's sect. Once he had trained all his disciples into immortals, his cultivation base should have recovered to its original level. At that time, he would definitely seek revenge from Wu Qi. Laughing hideously, Patriarch Yuan Hua began to fantasize about tearing Wu Qi into 1,000 pieces, seizing Princess Zhangluo, and having fun with her. With Lu Buwei's cooperation, he could keep summoning countless heavenly ghosts from Ghost Domain and fuse them into his Sea of Blood, then absorb as much blood essence and soul energy as he could on Panga continent to restore his cultivation base. With that, it would not take long for him to seek revenge from Wu Qi. Lu Buwei was a formidable figure. Just a few laughs from Patriarch Yuan Hua had allowed Lu Buwei to see through the lust in his heart. Lu Buwei smiled and left the secret chamber respectfully, then summoned a few of his grandsons. Before long, a dozen beautiful girls were sent into the secret chamber. Lu Buwei frankly admitted to Patriarch Yuan Hua that it was a little gift from him to show filial piety to his master. The door of the secret chamber slowly closed. Standing in front of it, Lu Buwei cocked his head to listen to the movements inside. When he heard the ripping of clothes, as well as the screams and begging of the girls, Lu Buwei smiled contentedly. Flicking his sleeves, Lu Buwei laughed in a low voice and said, "Why are you begging? Why are you crying? You are lucky to be able to serve the old immortal with your bodies. Hee, if you can give birth to a son or a daughter for the old immortal, humph." A bright gleam flashed in Lu Buwei's eyes as he told his grandsons to guard the door carefully. After that, he strode out with his sleeves fluttering. In the meeting hall in the backyard, Lu Buwei summoned all his descendants and told them that he had become Patriarch Yuan Hua's disciple. He asked them to start checking the resources they had, and quickly transform from the mode of running a merchant to the mode of running a sect. An idea had formed in Lu Buwei's mind. With Patriarch Yuan Hua as his disciple, he could use him to build a sect of immortal cultivators with the Lu clan as the controller behind the scenes. With that, the power he had in his hands would be strengthened, and the Lu clan would have another layer of protection, and the safety of the Lu clan would be greatly improved. Little Wu Qi, I'll definitely make you pay for what you've done to me in the past. Lu Buwei narrowed his eyes and suddenly laughed in a deep voice. After pondering for a while, he issued various orders to his descendants, and the huge Lu clan immediately began to operate at full speed. Over the next few days, Lu Buwei consulted Patriarch Yuan Hua about various mystic techniques every day, while the Lu clan began to pool all kinds of resources and manpower. A large number of Lu clan members and their subordinates had become Patriarch Yuan Hua's disciples. In just a few days, the newly established Yuan Hua sect had recruited over 3,000 disciples, including 60 heaven immortals. The newly established Yuanhua sect was much stronger than the sect that Patriarch Yuanhua had spent several dozens of periods to build. What made Patriarch Yuanhua even more satisfied was that Lu Buwei was extremely wealthy. All his disciples were given the best magical treasures, spirit items, immortal items, and many others. Even the most ordinary gold core cultivators were given magical items that were several grades higher than their level, especially those with outstanding aptitudes. Not to mention the spirit pills, spirit talismans, and other personal items, all of which were the best of the best. How could Yuanhua sect in the past compare with the army of money that Lu Buwei had meticulously built? Patriarch Yuanhua was overjoyed. Without hesitation, he began to teach all the essences of Blood Sea Grand Magic to his disciples according to their cultivation base. Blood Sea Grand Magic was an ancient top-grade Fiend League cultivation technique. It allowed them to cultivate at an extremely fast speed, and apart from having to guard against the backlashes of inner demons, there were almost no bottlenecks. But, even if they were attacked by inner demons, as long as they took precautions in advance, the inner demons would be devoured by the blood sea and turned into blood-draining fiends. In just half a month, the disciples of Yuanhua sect had preliminarily condensed their blood and energy into a small sea of blood inside their bodies. Once the sea of blood was formed, as long as one drop of blood essence escaped from it, they would be immortal, unless all the blood drops were destroyed in an instant. With such a powerful ancient fiend cultivation technique, Yuanhua sect's morale soared instantly. Bursting with confidence, Lu Buwei began to discuss with Patriarch Yuanhua how to invade Gourd Immortal Market. It would be best if they could kill Immortal Gourd, and then take over the cave abode. The only thing to worry about was that they did not know who was the master behind the Immortal Gourd. The spirit vein and spirit chi under the Gourd Immortal Market were not very good. The Gourd Immortal Market was not a good place to set up a sect. While Lu Buwei and Patriarch Yuanhua were discussing the matter, one of Immortal Gourd's executing disciples suddenly sent a secret message to all the immortals in Gourd Immortal Market. Someone was offering a huge reward for the head of one of King Dayu's personal guards, and anyone who could kill him would be rewarded with a huge amount of immortal stones, energy stones, and other materials. If anyone could capture Tan Lang's personal guard alive and hand him over to Immortal Gourd, the reward would be a cave abode with an immortal vein. A cave abode with an immortal vein. Lu Buwei and Patriarch Yuanhua were tempted immediately. Chapter 686. Many immortals in Gourd Immortal Market had gathered together. It was a wooden hall at the bottom of Gourd Immortal Market. All the planks were made of ordinary pine wood. Although the material was simple, it took a lot of effort to grind them. The patterns of the planks were put together to form a large pattern of clouds and dragons flying in the sky. There was once a bored immortal who estimated that the cost of gathering so many pine planks that coincidentally formed such a large cloud dragon diagram would be equivalent to using 10 times the amount of immortal stones to build such a seemingly ordinary hall. A large number of hassocks were placed in the spacious hall, on which sat Lu Buwei, Patriarch Yuanhua, and a large number of immortals, who were divided into groups according to their relationship with each other. At the end of the hall was a 3 feet tall wooden platform, on which sat a gaunt Daoist in a yellow Daoist robe. A fist-sized gourd hung from his bun. He was Immortal Gourd, the manager of Gourd Immortal Market. Lu Buwei studied Immortal Gourd curiously. This was the first time he had seen Immortal Gourd in person after running the market for several years. Patriarch Yuanhua gave Immortal Gourd a glance, then sent a voice transmission to Lu Buwei, "Gold Immortal, don't provoke him for the time being. When I've gathered enough blood essence and soul and restored my cultivation base, killing him will be a piece of cake." Lu Buwei's heart skipped a beat. Immortal Gourd actually had the cultivation base of a Gold Immortal. What tier of a Gold Immortal was he? What kind of connections did he have that allowed him to run his business here when Panga continent was in a mess? Gradually, more and more immortals arrived. When the immortal in charge of Myriad Immortal Mansion arrived with a few attendants, Immortal Gourd waved his sleeve, and 20 iron cabinets, each 6 feet in length, width, and height, appeared in front of everyone. The doors of the cabinets opened silently, revealing a pile of neatly polished immortal stones. Immortal Gourd glanced at the crowd of immortals and said calmly, "Kill Tan Lang, and you will be rewarded handsomely. This is the deposit that my client left with me. After pondering for a moment, Immortal Gourd said, the client has a very high reputation in Gourd Immortal Market. I can't reveal his identity, but as long as you kill Tan Lang, you'll be rewarded handsomely. With a flip of his palm, a wisp of purple aura that was 3 feet long and as thick as a thumb appeared on Spirit Gourd's palm. With a flick of his finger, this wisp of chi flew past the immortals at lightning speed. The immortals all used their divine senses to sense this chi and were shocked to find that it was an extremely pure and high-quality immortal chi. The immortal energy contained in this wisp of immortal energy was almost equivalent to all the immortal energy contained in a high-grade immortal stone. This wisp of immortal energy is a wisp of energy randomly extracted from the cave abode with the immortal vein promised by the client. Immortal Gourd waved his hand and retracted the wisp of purple energy. With a smile on his face, he said, that immortal abode is extremely secretive, and the client will swear a heart demon oath that as long as any fellow immortal can capture Tan Lang alive and bring him to me, the immortal abode will be handed over properly, and no one under the heaven will ever know its location again. Lu Buwei and Patriarch Yuan Hua exchanged a glance. Patriarch Yuan Hua nodded with a smile. It seemed that they had to capture that kid named Tan Lang alive and bring him to Immortal Gourd. Although he was King Yang Qiu's personal guard, it was worth it for the sake of an immortal abode of excellent quality. It would be very risky to plot against a king of Diyu, but how could it be risky to plot against a mere personal guard? There were mountains of immortal stones, countless precious treasures, and the promise of an immortal abode. The immortals in charge of the various powers in Gourd Immortal Market decided at the same time to use their respective forces to capture Tan Lang alive. One after another, they took a jade slip from Immortal Gourd, which recorded Tan Lang's current location. In fact, it was not Tan Lang's address, but the location of King Yang Qiu's army's encampment. As King Yang Qiu's personal guard, where else could he go if not by his side? In addition to the address, the jade slip also contained a clear portrait of Tan Lang, so clear that every hair on Tan Lang's face could be seen clearly. Next to the portrait were also the divine abilities and magic that Tan Lang was good at. For example, his cultivation base of the true body of heaven and earth scripture was very close to that of the second Panga heaven, and his mastery of all kinds of magic and curses was extremely profound, but no one knew the exact level of his cultivation base. A general of Diyu who cultivated both magic and fleshly body. Some of the immortals in charge of the minor powers frowned when they saw the information. It was relatively easy to deal with a general or an oracle of Diyu, but if there was a freak who cultivated both magic and fleshly body, it would take a lot of immortals with the same cultivation base as him to kill him. And if they wanted to capture him alive, it would take even more effort and planning. But Lu Buwei and Patriarch Yuan Hua had already left the Great Hall with a smile on their faces, and the immortals in charge of the major powers, including Myriad Immortal Mansion, had also left confidently. They were in a hurry to inform their respective powers to send powerful immortals to capture Tan Lang as soon as possible. Otherwise, someone else would take advantage of the situation. Now that Diyu's army was carrying out a devastating attack on Myriad Immortal Alliance, no one knew how many itinerant cultivators and itinerant immortals would be killed. If what Immortal Gourd said was true, that the immortal abode was very well hidden and could avoid the search of Diyu's army, then it would be of great value to any power. Not to mention that thousands of powers in Gourd Immortal Market were already preparing to deal with Wu Qi. Wu Qi was provoking Yu Qingqing in a slightly mocking tone in the Great Hall of King Yang Qiu's army. His rhetorical question made Yu Qingqing's face turn purple. Wu Qi knew that the old fellow must have suffered a lot in the formation, and there was no way he could break it. Yu Qingqing's face turned purple with anger, and a group of men and women in silk robes, all carefully selected handsome men and beautiful women with impeccable manners and bearing, jumped out at the same time, pointing their fingers at Wu Qi and scolding him with their words and pen. It was especially so for a young man, who was the most handsome, had the most elegant figure, and was clad in the most luxurious clothes. He approached Wu Qi step by step, pointing his finger at Wu Qi's nose and began to teach him a lesson. How dare you? Who do you think you are? How dare you disrespect Master Yu? You're just a reckless fool who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Do you think you're qualified to study the formation that even Master you can't break? The young man's saliva almost splashed on Wu Qi's face. Look at you, he said, shaking his head, I can tell you're from a humble background. I even doubt that you can read. You can break the formation. What a joke. Wu Qi did not say a word. He folded his arms over his chest and looked coldly at the group of arrogant and presumptuous young men in front of him. A mocking sneer hung at the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were full of disdain. His attitude had infuriated the group of men and women who were dressed in luxurious clothing. One after another, they accused Wu Qi of being disrespectful to Master Yu, saying that he was a vulgar, rude, lazy, incompetent, arrogant and despotic man who deserved to die 1,000 times for his crimes. Standing next to the map, King Yangqiu watched with a straight face. After a quarter of an hour, when the young men and women had almost run out of saliva, he snorted coldly. Just then, the young man who pointed at Wu Qi's nose and scolded him snapped, "You bastard, it's clear that even your parents are not." He could scold Wu Qi, but Wu Qi treated it as a pack of mad dogs, and he did not even have the motivation to get angry. But when the young man insulted his parents, Wu Qi's eyes turned cold, and he kicked the young man in the face. A dark shadow tore through the air, and a muffled boom rang out as Wu Qi's leg smashed down heavily. The young man was born with a sharp tongue, but apart from that, his cultivation base was really weak. Wu Qi's kick smashed down, breaking his tibia, spine, sternum, ribs, and scapula at the same time. Cracking noises rang out endlessly, and before the young man could even let out a miserable howl, he was sent flying backward with blood spraying out from his body. The group of young men and women in the great hall cried out in alarm and jumped back like frightened rabbits. Wu Qi gave them a cold glance and said coolly, "You can scold me, I don't care. But if you scold my parents, I deserve to kill you." Yu Qingqing's face turned blue with anger. He jumped up from the four-wheeled wooden chair, pointed at Wu Qi, and bellowed, "How dare you kill people in front of His Highness, you little brat? Do you still have any respect for His Highness?" With a faint smile on his face, Wu Qi put down his arms, cupped his fist, and bowed to King Yangqiu. "If I may ask, old Mr. Yu," he said in a deep voice, "before His Highness could speak to me, these ignorant men and women had already scolded me. Do they still have any respect for His Highness?" Wu Qi snorted coldly, tilted his head up and said proudly, "But, I was the one who let them insult me for 15 minutes without saying a single word. Do you think I'm disrespecting your Highness?" Yu Qingqing was so angry that his throat grew thicker. Roaring in exasperation, he pointed at Wu Qi and shouted at King Yangqiu, "Your Highness, please order me to kill this fiend." King Yangqiu gave Yu Qingqing a cold look and asked coolly, "Can Master Yu break the formation in the valley?" Yu Qingqing paused for a moment, then said awkwardly, I'm trying to break the formation." King Yangqiu ignored Yu Qingqing. He beckoned to Wu Qi and said, "Tan Lang, come here and study this formation for me. Let's see if you can break it. I've received information that the Lord of Wandering Immortal Hall is hiding in this valley. If you can break it, I'll give you a great merit." With a faint smile on his face, Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed to King Yangqiu. Then, he strode to King Yangqiu's side and began to study the various scenes in the map. Yu Qingqing's face turned extremely unsightly. Pointing at the young man who was killed by Wu Qi with a kick, he said coldly, "Your Highness, this man is the eldest grandson of the prefecture overseer of Yu Province." King Yangqiu looked at Yu Qingqing coldly, and after a full 10 minutes, he said coolly, "The prefecture overseer of Yu Province has failed in educating his son. He has insulted the parents of one of my generals with filthy words. It's a very fair and reasonable punishment. What do you think, Master Yu?" Yu Qingqing opened his mouth but could not say a word for a long time. Meanwhile, Wu Qi, who was studying the formation, smiled. Just as he was about to report his analysis of the formation to King Yangqiu, his heart suddenly beat 49 times violently. With each beat, a great amount of blood rushed through his body. Wu Qi felt waves of numbness all over his body, as if a dark cloud was pressing down on him from above. Vaguely, Wu Qi sensed a terrible killing intent coming at him. Chapter 687. The Yu Academy had planted quite a number of spies in the Yu clan of the Zhong province, and this was only to be expected. Yu Qingsheng was born in the Yu clan in Liangzhu, and was the clan master of all the Yu clan in the world. It was from Liangzhu that Yu Miao went to the Yu clan in Zhong province to take up the post of clan master. He brought a large number of Yu clan members with him to help him lay a foundation in Zhong province, and among them were people from Yu Academy. As Yu Miao served as the clan master in Zhong province for so many years, Yu Academy's power had infiltrated everywhere in Zhong province. Laughing complacently, Yu Qingsheng turned to his disciples and said, "I'm 70% sure I can break the formation in the valley. But why did I have to act as if I was helpless against that formation and even let the young prince lose a large number of people inside? Go back and think about the mystery, and report it to me in a few days. I'll take it as the topic of your exam this year." After helping Yu Miao win the power of Hai Province, Tan Lang had obtained all kinds of spells from the Directorate of Celestials. Then, he showed an amazing aptitude for cultivating both magic and fleshly body, and in just a few days, he had achieved a profound attainment in magic. Early this morning, he killed Yu Lei, the son of Yu Miao, the great elder of the Yu clan, and at the same time summoned a ghost god to seriously injure Yu Miao. Many of Yu Qingsheng's disciples bowed and praised at the same time, "Master is brilliant. What a good plan. What a good plan." Cold sweat was dripping from Yu Qingsheng's forehead. Having a supreme oracle cultivated by yourself and borrowing the power of other supreme oracles are two completely different things. The young prince's schemes are indeed deep. No wonder he didn't give any face today and completely sided with that brat. Sitting on a comfortable bed wrapped in golden clouds in his tent, Yu Qingsheng gave Wu Qi his final evaluation with a cold grin on his face, his left arm wrapped around a little maidservant in a green dress, and his right arm leaning against a pretty maidservant in a white dress, asking the maidservant to clean his ears with a set of special tools. If he can break the simplest heavenly thunder formation derived from the interaction and restraint of 5 elements, does he really think he can break the star Luo formation in front of us? Yu Qingsheng sneered and threw the scroll aside disdainfully. "Remember, this is my strategy of retreating in order to advance," he said coolly. "Let the young prince put this child in an important position. After this child suffers losses in the formation, I will make a move to break the formation in one fell swoop. If the young prince doesn't want to put him in an important position, I can't." In front of all the disciples, he reached his hand into the little maidservant's collar and pulled out 2 fair, smooth breasts. Then, he slowly played with them in his hand and gently flicked the 2 snow-white lumps of red berries. "I'll give you some hints," he said softly. "Master Lao Wang has trusted me all these years, but young master has his own ideas. He has always felt that he feels uncomfortable when I am telling him what to do." Tan Lang was a man of the wilderness, and his background was unknown. He was talented and intelligent, and had figured out the technique of absorbing Pangu's sacred energy to strengthen his fleshly body. After joining the army in Anhui City in Anlu County, Zhong Province, he was quickly put in an important position, and was recruited by Yu Miao's grandson, Yu Zong. Eventually, he became Yu Miao's right-hand man in the struggle for power. Impulsive. Yu Qingsheng rose to his feet angrily, then gritted his teeth and cried out in a low voice, "Go to the Great Hall and find out what Tan Lang is up to. From today on, I want to know everything he does. Mobilize all the disciples of Yu Academy in Mingu Province. No matter where he goes, what he does, what he eats, what he drinks, what he says, who he meets, and even which woman he sleeps with, I want to know everything." The crowd of men and women hurriedly bowed and answered. Their hearts were filled with respect and fear for their master, and for a moment, they felt that Yu Qingsheng had grown much taller. Sighing softly, Yu Qingsheng beckoned to one of his disciples. The disciple hurriedly pulled out a scroll from under his sleeve and handed it to Yu Qingsheng respectfully. While Yu Qingsheng was flipping through the scroll and reading the information on it, the disciple bowed slightly and began to introduce the information he had spent a lot of time gathering to Yu Qingsheng and his brothers and sisters. The eyes of Yu Qingsheng and his disciples lit up, and they nodded repeatedly, already having their own plans in mind. With King Yang Qiu's status, power, and financial resources, it was almost certain that he would do everything he could to push Wu Qi into the realm of Supreme Oracle. Now, King Yang Qiu could only rely on the Supreme Oracles of Yu Clan to act, and he could not completely control them. But Wu Qi was different. He had no foundation or background, and King Yang Qiu had pushed him to the level of Supreme Oracle, so he was still at King Yang Qiu's beck and call. He was wounded by a fiend immortal. Hundreds of millions of evil spirits poured into his spiritual ocean and trapped and killed his soul. Even the oracles of Zhong Province's Directorate of Celestials said they could not save him. Only the Supreme High Priest can kill the evil spirit and save his soul. With a cold snort, Yu Qingqing said in a flat tone, Tan Lang killed him, so why should we explain? Remember what happened 6 months ago? When I asked you and your senior brothers to serve in Yu Province, how did the prefecture overseer respond? Since he is unwilling to cooperate with us, I'll let him kill one of his sons as a warning. If he is sensible, he will naturally do as we say in the future. If he still doesn't understand how to cooperate with us, he will spend 3 months in seclusion to reflect on his mistakes. Next time, it may not be a good time. Wu Qi, who was disguised as Tan Lang, was very impulsive. He could not believe that he killed someone in front of so many people. But, impulsive young men were always easy to deal with. The man King Yang Qiu had brought here was so impatient that even if he had some ability, he could not overpower Yu Qingqing. It was obvious that in just 2 or 3 years, Tan Lang had not only made tremendous progress in magic cultivation base, but he had also organized a blood sacrifice and won the approval of the ghosts and deities in the outer realms. Unexpectedly, he now had a powerful ancestor god to worship. The ancestor god who could control thunderbolts seemed to be more powerful than Gui Shao, the ancestor god worshipped by Yu Miao. At least, according to the information sent by the disciples of Yu Academy who witnessed the fight between Wu Qi and Yu Miao today, the ghost god, shrouded in thunderbolts, seemed to have rushed straight into Gui Shao's lair to fight him. Yu Qingqing liked pedantic people. Such people had a moral bottom line in their hearts, and they were also the easiest to deal with. He had merely insulted his own parents, and before he could even finish his sentence, he had brazenly killed them. What was the big deal about being insulted? Yu Qingqing had done a lot of things over the years. If he could not let go of some of the perseverance in his heart, how could he make a name for himself in this world? In front of his male and female disciples, Yu Qingqing squeezed the little maidservant's breasts, narrowed his eyes, and chuckled to himself. His disciples smiled apologetically and hurriedly tried to recall if their elders had offended their master in any way. If they had to send a letter back as soon as possible and ask them to apologize to Yu Qingqing as soon as possible. Narrowing his eyes, Yu Qingqing played with the little maidservant's body while analyzing Tan Lang's character to his disciples. With a cold snort, Yu Qingqing took off his clothes and pressed the 2 maidservants down on the bed. It was in Ningbo City, High Province, when King Yang Qiu was patrolling with his generals to prevent Myriad Immortal Alliance from stirring up trouble, that he first saw Wu Qi leading a group of weak soldiers and making a group of Heaven Immortals flee with their tails between their legs. Wu Qi's fighting style was very popular with King Yang Qiu, and at that time, King Yang Qiu had the idea of promoting Wu Qi. Later, when Wu Qi was serving in Bo Yunting's army, he actually broke a formation deployed by a gold immortal and killed more than 100 gold immortals of the alliance, which made King Yang Qiu, who had suffered heavy casualties in the battle, decide to ask for Wu Qi's army from Bo Zhongfu. A few young men and women sat respectfully on 2 rows of stools in the tent, looking up at Yu Qingqing with eager eyes. When the maidservant finished picking out one of his ears and he turned his head to change his posture, a young man in white rose to his feet, cupped his fist at Yu Qingqing, and said, "Master, youngest brother was killed by Tan Lang on the spot. How are we going to explain this to the prefecture overseer?" Yu Qingqing smiled reservedly, then grabbed the scroll and hurriedly glanced at a line of words written in red with cinnabar. A freak who cultivated both fleshly body and magic already possessed the soul power of a 9-sun expert. That was to say, as long as he was not an idiot, he would certainly possess the cultivation base of a 9-sun expert in the future. Moreover, the advancement of human oracles was extremely fast, and it was not uncommon for those with excellent aptitude to become supreme oracles in just 100 years. Perhaps in just a few decades, Wu Qi would possess the power of a nine-sun expert, and he even had the potential to break through the realm of supreme oracles in the future. Yu Qingqing took a sip of the fragrant tea with a few slices of fire ginseng in it, twitched his mouth slightly, and added disdainfully, pedantic. The scroll contained Wu Qi's personal information. Remember, you have to be prudent in your actions, and you must never be like Tan Lang, who would kill people at the slightest disagreement. After pondering for a long time, Yu Qingqing's face grew gloomier and gloomier. Hundreds of millions of evil spirits. What kind of soul power was that? If Wu Qi had really escaped by absorbing the soul power of hundreds of millions of evil spirits, wouldn't that mean that his current soul power was comparable to that of a nine-sun great oracle? Perhaps the reason why King Yang Qiu had hurriedly transferred Wu Qi to serve under him was not because of Wu Qi's ability to crack formations, but because of his potential for future development. Yu Qingqing gave the maidservant's chest a hard squeeze and said angrily, "Why is that Tan Lang so lucky? Hundreds of millions of evil spirits invaded his body, and yet he still managed to survive? He is not a human being. He is a bastard." While Wu Qi and King Yang Qiu were examining the formation through the map, Yu Qingqing, who had just lost a great deal of face after having one of his disciples killed by Wu Qi, excused himself with a large group of his disciples and bid farewell to King Yang Qiu. Then, he left the great hall and returned to the tent where he usually lived. Apart from that, he even found out how Wu Qi had fallen into King Yang Qiu's eyes. Yu Qingqing's face gradually turned unsightly. Laughing strangely, he clenched his fingers and crushed the scroll into a puff of ashes. Nodding slowly, he said, "So that's how it is. Not only is Tan Lang's formation-breaking technique amazing, but it turns out that you have taken a fancy to this. He, an evil spirit refined by hundreds of millions of demon immortals, even a Sun High Priest wouldn't dare to boast that he could survive such an attack, but this kid actually managed to escape from the damage caused by hundreds of millions of evil spirits." Pointing to his head, Yu Qingqing said in a reserved manner, "All of you are my proud disciples, and all of you have brains. Those who work with their minds control others, and those who work with their bodies control others. It's like the difference between a rider and an animal. We are the riders, and Tan Lang and the others are the mounts. You can kill with your mind, but never with your fists. We disdain to do such a vulgar thing." Chapter 688. After spending a full 2 hours studying the formation in the valley, Wu Qi finally shook his head. "Your Excellency, I can only roughly see the layout of the formation from here. In order to see through it, I need to conduct a field survey." Even though Wu Qi boasted that his attainments in the Tao of formations were already unparalleled, the Tao of formations he had inherited was too ancient, and he had suffered a loss in Miaoying Palace many years ago. So, he dared not say that he could crack all the formations. The grand array at the bottom of the valley looked like a grand array of stars. However, if he wanted to see through it completely, he would have to go outside the valley and carefully examine it. He could not use remote sensing to see the array. King Yang Qiu folded his arms over his chest and stared at the map for a while, then asked in a flat voice, "Where did you learn the formation?" Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then pulled out a palm-sized jade from under his sleeve. It was simple in shape, shaped like half a cloud, and was carved with extremely exquisite patterns of stars and mountains. The jade was simple in design, with 7 colored spots seeping into its interior, giving it an air of vicissitudes of life. Wu Qi weighed the jade in his hand, then handed it to King Yang Qiu reluctantly. "This is a catalogue of the Tao of formations that I found by accident when I was hunting in the barren mountains of Anlu County." Wu Qi looked at the jade in King Yang Qiu's hand reluctantly and said in a low voice, "There is also a cultivation technique of the immortals in it, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't cultivate it. So, I just focused on studying the formation and ignored everything else." King Yang Qiu fiddled with the heavy jade in his hand. Although it was only the size of a palm, it weighed nearly 1,000 kilograms. It was a supreme-grade cloud soul jade, a supreme-grade material used to make all kinds of immortal jade slips. There was a huge amount of information in it. Apart from a complete set of array formation explanations from 1 origin, 2 forms, 3 talents, all the way to the cosmic stars formation, as well as all kinds of ancient divination, prediction, psychic communication, and communication with the veins of the stars and the earth, there was also a complete set of immortal cultivation method, the Dongxian Supreme Sutra. King Yang Qiu sent his divine sense into the jade block and quickly browsed through its contents. After wiping out all the immortal cultivation techniques recorded in it, he returned the jade block to Wu Qi with a smile on his face. Just as you said, the Array Dao catalog inside is not bad, study it when you have time. However, the immortal cultivation techniques inside are evil and unorthodox techniques, so it's better not to leave them inside. King Yang Qiu was very pleased. The fact that Wu Qi was willing to give him the jade so frankly proved that he was very loyal to him. In this way, everything could be explained. How could Wu Qi, a general of Diyu who was born in the wilderness, be so proficient in the Tao of formation? With just a quick glance, King Yang Qiu could tell that the Array Dao catalog in the jade block was extraordinary, much more brilliant than all the Array Dao catalog of immortals he had collected in his mansion. When Wu Qi said that he could not cultivate the techniques in the Dongxian Supreme Sutra, King Yang Qiu was laughing in his heart. It would be a miracle if you could. According to the information about Wu Qi obtained by King Yang Qiu, Tan Lang had figured out the technique of absorbing Panga's sacred energy to temper his fleshly body in the wilderness, and then went to Anhe city to join the army. As long as one had Panga's sacred energy in one's body, one could not cultivate any immortal cultivation techniques. This was an iron law that both the Celestial Court and Diyu knew. Fortunately, this kid first comprehended the method to absorb Panga's sacred energy before he found this jade slip. Otherwise, I would have lost a capable general under my command. TSK, I'm really lucky that he is proficient in the Tao of formation. King Yang Qiu looked at Wu Qi cheerfully, then suddenly asked, if you triple the size of East Sea County, can you let me make a copy of the Array Dao catalog of formation you have learned? I can guarantee that other than myself and you, there are at most 3 people in the world who can study this Array Dao catalog. Wu Qi knew that this was King Yang Qiu's condition. As a king who led the army personally, King Yang Qiu could not have seen the value of the Array Dao catalog in the jade block. Triple the size of East Sea County. According to the current size of East Sea County, if it was tripled, Wu Qi would have a province under his name. Even though the population of this province was small, it was still a province. Could the total land area of 100 myriad immortals planets be larger than that of Diyu's province? Without hesitation, Wu Qi handed the jade block to King Yang Qiu and said, what's the value of this? Your Excellency, you don't have to say that only 3 people can study it. As long as they are your Excellency's trusted subordinates, they can study it at will. My interest lies more in leading an army and fighting a war. As for breaking and dispelling formations, I really think it's a tedious task. King Yang Qiu smiled with greater satisfaction and appreciation. He took the jade block, took out a jade slip, and made a copy of all the Array Dao catalog in it. Then, he returned the jade slip to Wu Qi, nodded, and said with a smile, good, good. Tan Lang, you have been so loyal and diligent to me. I will certainly not treat you unfairly. With a wave of his hand, he threw the jade slip to an oracle in a black robe standing behind him and said in a deep voice, Yu clan has been disrespectful to me. As for the compensation, well, I'll give them all to you. Later, I'll issue an official document to expand the land of East Sea County by 3 times, and then I'll give you a batch of people, livestock, seeds, and money so that you can develop East Sea County as soon as possible. Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed respectfully to King Yang Qiu. How did he know I was blackmailing the Yu clan? He thought to himself. I suppose King Yang Qiu has a lot of eyes and ears in Zhongning City. Wu Qi stuffed the jade block back into the sleeve of his battle robe. He did not care about the Array Dao catalog copied by King Yang Qiu. He had killed so many heaven immortals and itinerant cultivators on Panga continent, and he had seized hundreds of Array Dao catalog and cultivation techniques. The array Dao catalog he gave to King Yang Qiu was nothing more than a doubling or tripling of the power of those itinerant cultivators on Panggu continent. Compared to the complex and vast essence of array Dao in the Scroll of Stealing, it was like a stream in the middle of a vast ocean, not worth mentioning at all. Moreover, the ultimate heavenly cave scripture was looted from the private collection of an upper-tier heaven immortal whom he had killed. Although it was a good immortal cultivation technique, Wu Qi was not interested in it at all. Putting it in the jade block was just to make King Yang Qiu believe Wu Qi's story. And this jade slip was made by Wu Qi himself after he showed his ability to break the formation in Bo Yunting's army. Using the technique Lu Xiaobai used to forge cultural relics and antiques, and his current divine ability and magic power, he deliberately made this antique jade slip to cover up his lie. How could a general Du, who was born in the wilderness and cultivated the true body of heaven and earth scripture, be able to break the formation of Bo Yunting's army of 100,000 soldiers? Anyone would have such a question, and by making such a jade slip, he could not only clear his name, but also present it to King Yang Qiu, which showed his loyalty. It was killing two birds with one stone, and it could not have been more worthwhile. Sure enough, the array Dao catalog that Wu Qi looked down upon had brought real benefits to Wu Qi. The territory of East Sea County had rapidly expanded by 3 times, which was equivalent to the territory of a province. Moreover, it was not under the jurisdiction of Zhong Province, which made Wu Qi the local tyrant of the East Sea County. No one would care what he wanted to do. It was a very good deal. Not to mention the population, livestock, seeds, and money that King Yang Qiu had promised him. With these things, Wu Qi could definitely speed up the development of East Sea County. Especially with the influx of a large number of foreigners, the people of Great Yan who still stayed in Princess Zhang Li's interstitial world could finally come out for a breath of fresh air. King Yang Qiu was overjoyed, and so was Wu Qi. In the Great Hall, many of King Yang Qiu's subordinates were looking at the jade slip carefully in the black-robed oracle's hand with eager eyes. These days, King Yang Qiu's army had suffered a lot in the face of the various formations laid out by Myriad Immortal Alliance. With this catalogue of formations, I'm afraid it will be the Alliance's turn to suffer, isn't it? Because it was Wu Qi who offered the array Dao catalog, and it seemed that he did not understand its significance to King Yang Qiu and even to the entire Great Yu army. What an honest and simple young man he was. The military officers around King Yang Qiu also looked at Wu Qi kindly, but at the same time, they were jealous of him. This guy's East Sea County was already ridiculously large, and now that it had expanded by 3 times, did that not mean that he had a province for nothing? A province directly under King Yang Qiu's command. There was no doubt that the East Sea County would become King Yang Qiu's most important nail in the periphery of Zhong Province, and Wu Qi, who directly controlled the East Sea County, would also become a very important member of King Yang Qiu's power system. With Wu Qi's East Sea County, King Yang Qiu had officially extended his hand into the periphery of Zhong Province, directly affecting several nearby first-grade provinces. Even though Yu Mu was also King Yang Qiu's subordinate, most of the people in the Yu clan were loyal to Lao Wang. How could they be as loyal and reliable as Wu Qi, who had been directly recruited and promoted by King Yang Qiu? Happy, Wu Qi, King Yang Qiu, and the others assembled the army and rushed out of the camp toward the huge valley ahead. Along the way, King Yang Qiu kept Wu Qi by his side, and personally introduced the various changes in the formation ahead to Wu Qi, as well as the various scenes when the soldiers were killed in the formation. The military officers looked at the scene with envy and jealousy, knowing that Wu Qi had become King Yang Qiu's favorite. Like a torrent that had broken through a dam, the army of tens of thousands of soldiers crossed hundreds of miles in just a quarter of an hour and arrived in front of the huge valley. There was a great commotion, and the roars of their mounts soared into the sky. Dozens of flying ships whizzed past overhead, and a large number of oracles hovered in the air, emanating a tremendous wave of energy that swept out in all directions. Such a great commotion immediately alarmed the immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance in the valley. Dozens of immortals flew out of the valley and stood on top of a few rocky peaks that were about 10,000 feet tall, cupping their fists and greeting the army with smiles on their faces. King Yang Qiu, are you here to fight the formation again? How many men are you going to lose this time? A white-bearded old Taoist, clad in an apricot-yellow Taoist robe, carrying a 7 stars dragon fang sword on his back, holding a horsetail whisk in his hand, and looking like a transcendent immortal, taunted King Yangqiu. His tone was full of sarcasm and complacency. King Yangqiu gave the Taoist a gloomy look, but he did not get angry. "When I break the formation, I'll definitely kill you with 1,000 cuts, and I'll have the whole army treat your wife and daughter well," he said coolly. As King Yangqiu's voice rang out, Wu Qi rode to the edge of the valley and fixed his eyes on the valley ahead. Chapter 689. The immortals were looking at Wu Qi, but Wu Qi did not even spare them a glance. After glancing at the huge ravine, Wu Qi slowly closed his eyes. Then, he performed an incantation gesture with both hands and placed them over his eyes, murmuring a strange incantation in a low voice. The sunny sky suddenly darkened, and a chilly wind fell straight down from the sky, filling the air with dust and sand. A small whirlwind, no more than a foot high, spun and rolled up countless blades of grass and dust. King Yangqiu looked appreciatively at the weapon, while the generals around him exchanged glances with each other, their faces pale with fright. He was indeed a freak who cultivated both magic and fleshly body. There were so many princes and dignitaries in Diyu, but only a few of the oldest princes had such figures around them, and all of them were top experts in Diyu. And now, King Yangqiu had found such a freak. Unknowingly, the generals and oracles around King Yangqiu straightened their backs. A man who cultivated both magic and fleshly body was of great value to King Yangqiu. Only King Yangqiu's confidants knew that even among the upper echelons of Diyu, there were some conflicts that were not known to outsiders. Just like King Yangqiu and his brothers, there were all kinds of disputes between them. "At all costs, even if I have to exhaust all the resources at hand, I must make him improve his cultivation base as quickly as possible." King Yangqiu clenched his fists tightly and made up his mind. At the same time, he felt a little headache. The fact that Wu Qi cultivated both magic and fleshly body could not be kept a secret. He had to do his best to improve Wu Qi's cultivation base, but some others would probably have to do their best to cut off Wu Qi's head. A fierce gleam flashed across his eyes. King Yangqiu was indifferent to the provocation of those immortals from Myriad Immortal Alliance, but this time, he clenched one of his teeth and broke it. Blood sprayed out of his mouth as he slowly swallowed the broken teeth and murmured in a low voice, "You are wrong, and I am right. I can't let you do whatever you want." A thick grayish-white aura poured into Wu Qi's body like dragons, and amidst a shrill ghost howl, he slowly opened his eyes. His eyes had turned grayish-white, and 2 small ghost heads had appeared where his pupils used to be. The ghost heads were shooting out a thin grayish-white beam of light, which was so thin and weak that it penetrated thousands of miles through the faint mist in the valley ahead. It was one of the many eye techniques of the Directorate of Celestials, the eyes of myriad ghosts. It allowed the user to gather the power of myriad ghosts in their eyes, allowing them to see through all the veins in the earth and the circulation of natural energy. When cultivated to the highest level, they could even peer into the yellow springs. Legend had it that someone had cultivated the eyes of myriad ghosts to an unimaginable level, allowing them to see the ghosts struggling and roaring in the transmigration under the yellow springs. Wu Qi had not cultivated the eyes of 10,000 ghosts to a very profound level, and he had only been studying the various magic techniques of the Directorate of Celestials for about 2 years. How could he have the time to practice these mystic arts? But, he had the chaotic divine eyes as his foundation, and with them as the foundation, he was able to exert the power of the eyes of 10,000 ghosts to a very powerful level in one fell swoop. Wherever the wisps of ghost light shone, the faint mist that the immortals from Myriad Immortal Alliance had deliberately created in the valley could no longer block Wu Qi's eyes. In a flash, he had seen everything in the valley. The mountains and rivers map used by King Yangqiu was also an extraordinary treasure that could spy on the enemy's movements from hundreds of miles away. But, its power was limited, and the mist that the immortals from Myriad Immortal Alliance had created in the formation had interfered with the mountains and rivers map. Only when Wu Qi peeked into the formation with the eyes of 10,000 ghosts did he realize that the situation in the valley was very different from what he had seen in the map. Surrounding the small lake in the middle of the valley and the gorgeous immortal pavilions were 12 peaks that stood 100 miles high. These peaks had been concealed by someone with the technique of bubble and shadow. The 12 peaks, each about 100 miles high and about a mile in circumference, had been compressed into 12 beautiful artificial mountains that stood no more than 100 feet tall. Surrounding these 12 peaks was a ring of 108 peaks, each 64 miles high. These peaks corresponded to the positions of the celestial Dipper star and the earthly Fiend star, and by drawing the star power down from the sky, they had formed the true forms of 108 celestial lords. Various spirit beasts, such as flood dragons, Pishio, Qilin, serpents, bears, and wolves, were wheeling and roaring furiously. These true forms were condensed from starlight, and each of them contained a wisp of the divine power of the celestial lords. Once they were activated, their power was truly frightening. The celestial lords and the earthly Fiend star lords were the leaders of the celestial lords conferred by the celestial court, and each of them possessed very strong divine abilities and magic power. The formation of Heavenly Dipper and Earthly Fiend outside the celestial court was said to have the power to trap a top-grade primordial immortal. But now, it had drawn a wisp of the divine power of the celestial lords and the earthly Fiend star lords, which meant that its power was not to be underestimated. Although it was impossible to trap a primordial immortal, it could easily trap hundreds of gold immortals. The 108 peaks had also been concealed by someone with a divine ability. They looked like a bunch of inconspicuous mounds of dirt piled up on the ground, and some ordinary thatched cottages had been built around them. The person who had constructed the formation was indeed a little abominable, as he was afraid that he would not be able to lure more people into the formation to die. Beyond these two rings of peaks were the 36,000 stone peaks that King Yang Qiu had seen in the map, each of which was guarded by an itinerant cultivator whose cultivation base was at least at the nascent soul realm. These stone peaks corresponded to the stars, and each of them was guarded by an itinerant cultivator whose cultivation base was at least at the nascent soul realm. Everything was arranged according to the stars in the sky, including the 12 Yuanchen, the 28 mansions, the azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise. In the key parts of these star regions, the important peaks were all guarded by existences with the cultivation base of heaven immortals. In this formation alone, there were 1,080 heaven immortals guarding the foundation of the formation on the 36,000 peaks. What astonished Wu Qi even more was that this formation was actually a complete formation with a complete set of formation instruments. There was an altar on each of the stone peaks, 3 offerings on each of them, and a 36 feet long flag flashing with a silver gleam, fluttering in the air. These flags were condensed from the star power, and they were flickering with the true shadow of the stars corresponding to the peaks, which had also attracted a wisp of the divine power of the corresponding stars. In addition to the arrangement on the peaks, there were also many weapons, such as sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, hammers, and many other weapons flying in the air around each of the peaks. With just a glance at the weapons, Wu Qi knew that they were all made according to the pattern of the weapons carried by the celestial lords of the stars in the sky. For example, the heavenly evil star usually used the 7-star dragon abyss sword, and there was a 6 feet long sword hovering next to the stone peaks in the heavenly evil star's position. Another example was the heavenly evil star usually used a pair of one-handed axes to chop off people's heads, and there were 2 8-feet-long bronze axes the size of a door hovering next to the stone peaks in the heavenly evil star's position, glowing with a strong blood-red light. 36,000 stone peaks meant that there were 36,000 tailor-made immortal weapons flying in the air. Even Wu Qi could not help but feel his scalp go numb at the sight. Heavens, how much effort did Myriad Immortal Alliance put in to lay out this formation? Although in Wu Qi's Dharma eyes of 10,000 ghosts, all 36,000 sets of immortal items were the most ordinary 36th-grade immortal items, and their power was the weakest among all 36th-grade immortal items. But when so many of them were drawn by the formation and attracted the power of the stars, even a gold immortal would not be able to defend against them. Not to mention that the arrangement on the peaks clearly showed that the formation could attract the projections of the celestial lords in the sky to come down to help. If the projections of those celestial lords really came down to help, they could increase the power of the formation by more than 100 times. It was still impossible to kill a top-grade primordial immortal, but a low-grade supreme oracle like Yugu would most likely be trapped in the formation and unable to escape. Sucking in a cold breath, Wuqi turned his eyes to the pool in the middle of the valley. He had a feeling that there was something strange about it. After staring at the pool for a while, Wuqi had just used the 1,000 ghost eyes to see through a layer of drifting silver starlight over the pool, and when he saw a strong energy of pure spirit emanating from the bottom of the pool, a column of intense flame suddenly rose from the formation. The flame was pale gold in color and looked like melted glass, quiet and without the slightest violent aura. But as soon as it appeared, the two ghost heads in Wuqi's eyes exploded, and the grayish-white mist around him sprayed out in all directions while letting out shrill ghost howls. The small whirlwinds on the ground subsided abruptly as well, and the sun appeared out of nowhere in the sky, sprinkling its scorching rays down. A middle-aged Taoist clad in a pale gold Taoist robe and holding a round mirror about a foot in diameter flew up on a white cloud. When he was less than 10 miles away from Wuqi, he let out a loud laugh and said, "My ignorance nearly allowed you to see through the formation, General." After laughing, the Taoist shook his head and said, "You're using the 1,000 ghost eyes, aren't you? To be able to see through my 10,000-mile grand array with a single glance, you must have spent at least 30 to 50 years of hard work on this 10,000 ghost Dharma eye. What a pity. My brilliant sun true flame mirror is specialized in breaking all kinds of ghost Dao spells, so I'm afraid you won't be able to keep your 1,000 ghost eyes." Wuqi shook his head and slowly took a few steps back. With a gloomy face, King Yangqiu drove the chariot a few steps forward and cried out coldly, "Lord Wandering Immortal, you are one of the top figures in Myriad Immortal Alliance. Don't you feel ashamed to launch a sneak attack?" This middle-aged Taoist was the Lord of Wandering Immortal Alliance. Wuqi retracted the 1,000 ghost eyes and looked at him curiously. 30 to 50 years of hard work. It had only been a few days since Wuqi began to cultivate the 1,000 ghost eyes, and his foundation was actually the chaotic divine eyes. So, he was not afraid of the brilliant sun true flame mirror. The Wandering Immortal Hall chief burst into laughter again. He heaved a long sigh and said, "Shame. What's there to be ashamed of? I've only laid out a small formation, yet I've stopped the mighty King Yangqiu from advancing, and instead, I've suffered heavy casualties. What's there to be ashamed of? On the contrary, King Yangqiu, with his army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, can't do anything to me. That's a disgrace to King Yangqiu, isn't it?" After laughing 3 times, Lord Wandering Immortal cried out, "King Yangqiu, you've lost tens of thousands of soldiers in this formation last time, and only a few of your generals managed to escape. Now, let me ask you, do you dare to enter my formation again?" King Yangqiu did not answer. Instead, he turned to look at Wuqi. Wuqi pondered for a moment, then made a gesture of retreat. King Yangqiu nodded, raised his right fist, and waved it backward. The tens of thousands of soldiers immediately retreated without saying a word to Lord Wandering Immortal. All the immortals and cultivators in the formation were struck dumb. This was not like King Yangqiu's character. Chapter 690. Even without Wuqi's explanation, they all knew what the alliance was up to. When King Yangqiu sent an army to attack the formation for the first time, Myriad Immortal Alliance had slaughtered tens of thousands of soldiers, leaving only some seriously wounded generals and ordinary soldiers to flee back to the formation, just to lure King Yangqiu into sending more soldiers and generals to their deaths. Taking a deep breath, King Yangqiu pointed at Wuqi and cried out, "Tan Lang, tell me, can you break this formation?" The oracles stole glances at their companions, and then turned to look at Wuqi at the same time. They knew, and they also knew that King Yangqiu knew very well that all the oracles present had been practicing mystic arts for hundreds of years, but it had only been 2 years since Wuqi started practicing mystic arts, and yet his eyes of 10,000 ghosts had already surpassed all of them. Either all the oracles present were idiots, or Wuqi was a genius. Looking up at King Yangqiu, Wuqi pointed at the layout of the 36,000 peaks in the periphery. As he pointed at the peaks one by one, the flags condensed of star power, the heaven immortals and cultivators who guarded the peaks, and the immortal artifacts hovering around them were all exposed to King Yangqiu and the others. Wu Qi looked curiously in the direction of the Great Hall's gate. What was Lu Bang doing here? From a distance, Lu Bang's hearty and somewhat slippery laughter rang out. King Yang Qiu, I've come to see you today. Don't shut the door on me. I'm an old friend of King Yang Shan, so you can't just shut the door on me, can you? As soon as Yu Qingqing's voice rang out, a long shout came from the entrance of the cloud platform. The oracles were all sighing with emotion. With this freak serving King Yang Qiu, it was likely that they would not be put in an important position. On the other hand, King Yang Qiu, who had kept silent with a straight face, was cheering and roaring in his heart, wonderful. I'm so lucky to have such a talent. I must improve Tan Lang's cultivation base as quickly as possible. Wonderful. Wu Qi shook his head and chuckled. He did not bother to explain further and walked to the side of the catalogue. The other generals sat on the black chairs on both sides according to their positions, looking at Wu Qi with bright eyes. A priest in a black robe casually tossed a thin jade slip towards Wu Qi. He hurriedly grabbed the jade slip and scanned it with his divine sense. It was the method to control the catalogue in front of him. Then, it was the peak slightly outside, where the true life forms of the 108 celestial spirits and earthly fiends had been condensed. Wu Qi said frankly, not to mention the others, just these true life forms of the 108 celestial spirits and earthly fiends alone. Legend has it that the celestial spirits and earthly fiends conferred by the celestial court are all great demons. Their true forms and divine abilities are all in line with the heavenly Tao. With the conferment of the celestial court, although they only had the cultivation base of gold immortals, they could fight against primordial immortals with the help of the power of the stars. Although this is only the true life form of one celestial spirit and a wisp of divine power, when 108 celestial spirits join forces. King Yang Qiu sucked in a cold breath. He rose to his feet in horror and bellowed, 36,000 sets of immortal items. What are these bastards trying to do? Strange. If they are so powerful, why did they? The dozens of powerful oracles in the Great Hall all bowed their heads and dared not to say a word. They had felt very strange when Wu Qi used the eyes of 10,000 ghosts just now. The ghost aura emanating from Wu Qi was not very strong, but it was very surprising that he could see through the formation with the eyes of 10,000 ghosts. After all, the valley was obscured by the smoke and clouds generated by the formation. Even the few strongest sun oracles around King Yang Qiu could only see about 1,000 miles into the formation with the eyes of 10,000 ghosts. They could not see what the core of the formation looked like, let alone discover the existence of the 12 mountains. With that, Wu Qi pulled King Yang Qiu and disappeared without a trace. Staring blankly at the dust stirred up by the army, Lord Wandering Immortal, who was pretending to try to entice King Yang Qiu to send another army to attack the formation, stamped his feet angrily. 12 beams of light shot out of his eyes, and in the middle of the picture, Wu Qi marked out the positions of the 12 mountains he had seen with the eyes of 10,000 ghosts. Driven by his mind, the catalogue automatically condensed into mountains according to the images he saw with a faint light. King Yang Qiu jumped to his feet as soon as he saw the mountains with the wrong positions. Didn't any of you know how to use the eyes of 10,000 ghosts before Tan Lang? He bellowed. As the army returned to the barracks, Wu Qi, King Yang Qiu, and the others went back to the Great Hall. Wu Qi and the hundreds of captains were all clad in heavy armors, and their boots were made of the same metal. Therefore, when they walked, their footsteps produced rumbling noises that sounded like muffled thunderclaps. It was a very frightening sight. In the Great Hall, a few of Yu Qingqing's disciples were pointing at the map and calculating the details of the formation. When they saw Wu Qi and the others return, they hurriedly retreated. How could a man like Yu Gu compare with King Yang Qiu's trusted aides in terms of loyalty and pragmatism? Without Wu Qi, according to King Yang Qiu's temperament, he was likely to mobilize the superior army that he thought could easily destroy the formation to avenge his beloved general. But, according to the layout of the formation, unless King Yang Qiu mobilized more than 10 supreme oracles, there was no way they could break it, and everyone would be trapped in it. Gritting his teeth, Lord Wandering Immortal sneered and said, "You're lucky today. King Yang Qiu, how much longer can you be so arrogant? The Alliance leader's plan is about to enter the second phase. Hee, you must have had a good time killing us these days, haven't you? After muttering to himself for a while, he shook his head and sighed, then led the dozens of immortals behind him back to the pavilion in the valley. There was still a long way to go before Myriad Immortal Alliance's final plan could be completed. I'll make a decision when the situation is about to become clear. Should I stay in the Tao League or join the Buddhist League? We'll see when the time comes. Glaring fiercely at the oracles around him who bowed their heads in silence, King Yang-Chio cried out in a deep voice, I can forgive you this time. The Directorate of Celestials has all kinds of mystic arts, and it's understandable that you don't specialize in the eyes of 10,000 ghosts. Taking a deep breath, King Yang-Chio sat back on his throne, then waved his hand to signal Wu Qi to continue analyzing the formation. Wu Qi was lost in thought as he studied the three-layered formation. At last, he pointed his finger at the pool in the middle of the valley. There's something strange in the pool, he said in a deep voice. There's something very powerful in it. If I can figure out what's in it, I should be able to break the formation. A black jade throne rose silently in the great hall, followed by a few rows of large chairs of different heights on either side of the map. Sitting on these very high chairs, one could overlook the whole map from above. With the incredible eyesight brought by the strong fleshly bodies of these Deu generals, although the map was only a few miles long and wide, they could not miss any detail. King Yang-Chio took off his armor and robe and put on the outfit that Wu Qi had seen just now. Sitting crookedly on the jade throne, he pointed at the map and cried out, Tan Lang, what have you found? Tell me now. My subjects, please take a closer look. Perhaps, the key to breaking the formation in the future will be with this guy. It's not that it can't be, it must be with him. With a cracking sound, King Yang-Chio and the hundreds of generals under him crushed the armrests of their chairs to pieces. Judging by their neat movements, it was clear that this was not the first time they had done this. At the same time, a few oracles raised their hands and waved them at the same time. A bright light swept across the room, turning the broken armrests into powder and floating in the air before quickly reforming into armrests again. Looking at Wu Qi, King Yang-Chio's heart was pounding violently. I must cultivate him into a supreme oracle as soon as possible. Of course, before that, he had to give Wu Qi more high positions and generous salaries, as well as countless rich and beautiful women, so that he could win his heart. King Yang-Chio raised his eyebrows. Just as he was about to speak, Yu Qingqing's voice came from outside the great hall, Your Excellency, don't be deceived by this guy. How could a mere Myriad Immortal Alliance form the true form of a celestial lord in the formation? Does he think the alliance has the support of the celestial court? King Yang-Chio's face twitched. After pondering for a moment, he slowly clapped his hands and said, Open the main gate and welcome the envoy of the celestial court. King Yang-Chio, who was still in shock a moment ago, slowly sat back on his jade throne and cried out in a deep voice, Hee, what a good plan. These immortals are indeed insidious and treacherous, and they are no longer the same as us, the chosen ones. What a group of people. Wu Qi could not help but marvel in his mind. The fact that King Yang-Chio and his generals were able to perform the exact same actions showed that they had almost reached the level of telepathic fiend energy. And the fact that those oracles were able to cast spells to restore the armrests of their chairs so neatly showed that they had done this many times, and they were very experienced in it. Wu Qi marked out the peaks corresponding to the 12 Yuanchen, then explained the possible impact the existence of these 12 peaks would have on the entire formation. When King Yang-Chio and the generals heard that the power of the formation could even threaten primordial immortals with the addition of the 12 peaks, their faces turned extremely unsightly in an instant. Did this have anything to do with the formation of the Myriad Immortal Alliance? So, Wu Qi was a genius, a rare genius who cultivated both fleshly body and magic. Cupping his fist at the oracle, Wu Qi memorized the hundreds of hand seals in the jade slip, then performed an incantation gesture with both hands and pointed at the center of the formation. Shoving the brilliant sun true flame mirror into his sleeve, Lord Wandering Immortal looked up at the sky and sighed. Should I continue to be an immortal, or should I go to the 8 treasures lotus throne like them? Tao League is good. Buddhism League is good. Tao League is free and unfettered, but Buddhism League is powerful, and we can get a lot of benefits. But, among the oracles present, there were several powerful sun oracles. How could they be idiots? Special envoy of the celestial court, Lu Bang, King of Han, requests an audience with your excellency. But, 10 supreme oracles working together. Do you think King Yang Qiu is the current human emperor? It was not easy for King Yang Qiu to recruit Yu Gu, and it was only because all his descendants had been subdued by King Yang Qiu that he was willing to serve King Yang Qiu to a limited extent. The faces of the generals and oracles in the Great Hall flickered, and they turned to look at Wu Qi at the same time. Chapter 691. When he opened the front door of the Great Hall, all the doors were wide open, and the longbow people lined up on both sides. Hundreds of powerful longbow people, together with 3,000 elite soldiers in bright armor, were standing in a line to welcome Lu Bang. Coupled with the sonorous trumpets and the dull beating of war drums, King Yang Qiu had arranged a grand array to welcome Lu Bang. When he recalled how King Yang Qiu had tried to kill Lu Bang the last time they met, Wu Qi felt that the scene before him was like a dream. Not only did Wu Qi find the scene a little absurd and unbelievable, even Lu Bang himself was a little stunned. Sitting in the chariot, surrounded by a large group of beautiful female immortals and guarded by a large group of heavenly soldiers, Lu Bang looked cautiously at King Yang Qiu, who had come out to greet him, and even put on a posture of running away at any time. Wu Qi even saw a faint white cloud swirling under Lu Bang's feet, and he had even prepared an escape art. King Yang Qiu led Wu Qi and a large group of military officers and oracles out of the cloud platform. As he strode along, he said in a low voice, "Don't underestimate this man. He's not a good guy, but those who dare to underestimate him have all been killed by him. The men my father trained once fought him head-on. Even though my father is a hero, he failed to defeat him. You must be careful of him." As they walked, King Yang Qiu introduced the few generals around Lu Bang to Wu Qi and others. Zhang Liang, Han Xian, Xiao He, and Fan Kuai, who stood next to Lu Bang like an iron block, were all looking at them with bright gleams in their eyes. Blue veins were bulging on the back of Fan Kuai's hands, and it was clear that he was ready to strike at any time. The last time King Yang Qiu and Lu Bang met, King Yang Qiu had attacked and wounded Zhang Liang and others. Later on, it was Lu Bang who had used his trump card to force King Yang Qiu back. The tragic scene was still fresh in their minds. If King Yang Qiu suddenly attacked, and Lu Bang did not have time to react, he might really be killed by him. Therefore, they had to be careful. But today, King Yang Qiu was extremely gentle. With a faint smile on his face, he came to the front of Lu Bang's chariot, cupped his fist, and bowed to Lu Bang. "Please forgive me for not going out to greet you, celestial emissary. King of Han is an honorable guest that no one can invite. Please come into the hall as soon as possible. I've prepared a fine banquet to welcome King of Han." With a strange laugh, King Yang Qiu narrowed his slender eyes and glanced at the people around Lu Bang. "Well, I've heard that King of Han likes beautiful women," he said coolly. "So, I've prepared a lot of stunning beauties for King of Han. I'm sure you'll be satisfied with them." Lu Bang narrowed his eyes and smiled as well. With his belly propped up, he slowly rose to his feet, stepped out of the chariot, and bowed to King Yang Qiu. Grinning from ear to ear, Lu Bang shook hands with King Yang Qiu and looked him in the eyes. Then, he nodded and said, "It's great to have beautiful women. Come on, I've come to the right place with fine wine and beautiful women." Lu Bang did not mention that he was an old friend of King Yang Qiu's father, and King Yang Qiu also chose to forget those words. Holding hands, they looked at each other and smiled like a pair of affectionate childhood sweethearts. Their smiles were so pure that they could only be described as perfect, with no flaws to be found. In Wu Qi's eyes, the two men looked at each other and giggled for a while, then walked hand in hand toward the Great Hall. A large group of military officers and oracles hurriedly followed behind King Yang Qiu, while Fan Kuai and others followed closely behind Lu Bang. One of King Yang Qiu's subordinates, who was about 10 feet tall and about the same size as Fan Kuai, saw Fan Kuai following closely behind Lu Bang, and without saying a word, he bumped his shoulder toward Fan Kuai. It was only a short distance of 2 to 3 feet, but when the general collided with Fan Kuai, a strange whistling noise rang out, and his elbow was aimed at Fan Kuai's ribs, looking like he was going to break Fan Kuai's ribs. A fierce gleam flickered in Han Xian's eyes as he turned to look at the general. Fan Kuai, on the other hand, laughed joyfully. Like a bear in heat, he leaped to the side and thrust his elbow toward the general's elbow as well. With a loud bang, the two elbows collided with each other. The heavy armors worn by both men were defensive treasures of excellent quality. Fan Kuai's was an upper-grade heaven immortal artifact crafted by the master craftsman of the Celestial Court, while the armor worn by the general was of the highest quality crafted by the master craftsman of Dayu's Directorate of Celestials. Both sets of armor contained extremely powerful strength. When the two sets of armor collided with each other, the result was mutual destruction. Large cracks spread out from the tips of the two elbows like spider webs, and the armor fragments fell to the ground with tinkling sounds. The two generals, who looked like wild beasts, exchanged a glance and slowly took a step to the side. Wu Qi could clearly see that their elbows had not been lowered for a long time. Presumably, the collision had damaged their bones and meridians. Their armors glowed faintly, and some of them began to ripple like flowing water, repairing the cracks on their elbows. Wu Qi happened to be walking next to Han Xian, and he heard Han Xian murmur in a low voice, "What's the point of being so brave?" Subconsciously, Wu Qi gave Han Xian a look. After all, he had fought him before. But Han Xian gave Wu Qi a rude glare. His eyes were as sharp as knives, full of warning and deterrence, as if Wu Qi dared to look at him one more time, Han Xian would attack him without hesitation. Wu Qi smiled faintly. This was a troublesome man with thorns all over his body. Sooner or later, Wu Qi would have to pluck all the thorns out of him. Han Xian's fierce glare had infuriated Wu Qi. He began to think of asking Lu Qingfeng to send a capable intelligence agent to search for Xiangyu. He must let Xiangyu know that Lu Bang had come to Panga continent, and that Han Xian was right next to Lu Bang. He wondered what kind of wonderful sparks would be produced when these old foes met. With all kinds of bad thoughts rumbling in his mind, Wu Qi and his company had returned to the Great Hall of the army. The maps of mountains and rivers in the Great Hall had disappeared, replaced by banquets and tables carved out of black jade. All kinds of delicacies were piled up in the hall. In the middle of the Great Hall, there was an open space about a mile in circumference. Hundreds of beautiful female immortals and cultivators stood there, trembling with fear. Some of the female cultivators' faces were twitching, and tears were streaming down their faces from time to time. As soon as Lu Bang entered the Great Hall, his eyes lit up when he saw these beautiful female immortals and cultivators. Sure enough, they are all stunning beauties. I wonder, he said happily. King Yang Qiu waved his hand generously and said in a flat voice, "These girls are all captives I've captured when I annihilated the rebels, and they have not been touched by anyone. They are all pure virgins. If King of Han likes them, you can take them away with you. But they have to entertain us first, and only leave with you after I've enjoyed myself to the fullest." Lu Bang nodded hurriedly, his eyes narrowing into slits as he smiled. Of course, that's how it should be. If that's the case, I won't stand on ceremony. These beauties are of the finest quality, and only a man like me who cherishes flowers can take good care of them. Wu Qi gave Lu Bang a look and thought to himself, this guy sure knows how to boast shamelessly. The banquet was ready, and everyone was seated according to the order of the host and the guest. The aroma of fine wine and delicacies wafted through the air. Musicians were playing music in the corners of the Great Hall, while hundreds of female immortals and cultivators danced stiffly in the hall. Although their faces were unsightly and their movements were stiff like wooden dolls, the occasional glimpse of their pink and tender bodies still aroused the cheers of the crowd. Suddenly, the thin veil on a female cultivator, who looked to be in her teens and whose cultivation base was only at the Jin Dan realm, fell off. Naked, she shrieked and squatted on the ground in horror, not daring to move. Sitting on the throne, King Yang Chio's eyes turned cold as he snorted softly. One of the black-robed oracles standing next to him flicked his finger, causing the female cultivator's body to stiffen and her head to explode, spilling blood all over the floor. King Yang Chio picked up his wine vessel and smiled at Lu Bang, whose face was a little stiff. These bitches really don't know how to have fun. They have submitted to the immortal Tao, and they are no longer the people of Diyu. Now, they are being asked to dance for entertainment instead of being asked to greet this king's soldiers. This is already their good fortune. How dare they disturb my honored guest's pleasure? Don't they deserve to die? Lu Bang turned to look at King Yang Chio, nodded slowly, and said, "Sure enough, this little bitch deserves to die. All she did was expose her body a little. No one raped her on the spot, so why did she make such a fuss? What a disappointment, a disappointment. How pitiful. How pitiful. Such a delicate body has to die before it can be enjoyed by anyone." He heaved a long sigh and suddenly burst into tears. In front of so many people, Lu Bang suddenly burst into tears and snot rolling down his cheeks. Before long, he was rolling on the ground, wailing and waving his arms and legs as if he had gone mad. Holding his wine vessel, King Yang Chio stared blankly at Lu Bang, his eyes wide. He had no idea what was wrong with Lu Bang. In the great hall, all the generals of Diyu stared blankly at Lu Bang with a mocking smile on their faces. On the other hand, Zhang Liang and the other attendants brought by Lu Bang had their heads bowed and remained motionless like wooden statues. On the other hand, the dancing female cultivators and immortals stopped dancing in panic and gathered together, not daring to make the slightest movement. Their lives were in King Yang Chio's hands, and if they made the slightest movement that they should not have, they would soon be turned into horrible corpses, just like the girl just now. Fiddling with the wine vessel, King Yang Chio watched Lu Bang writhe and wail. After a full 10 minutes, he asked slowly, "Why are you so sad, King of Han? What is it that makes you unhappy? Why don't you tell me so that I and my men can be happy?" Wu Qi nearly spat out the wine in his mouth. King Yang Chio's words were too insidious. But then, he saw Lu Bang roll to his feet and sit on the ground. With tears in his eyes, he looked at King Yang Chio and wailed, "What's there to be unhappy about? I'm just sad about the hardship of the people's livelihood, and the innocent people who have died tragically in the past few years." Disregarding his dignity, Lu Bang rolled to King Yang Chio's side, put his arms around his thigh, and cried, "The Celestial Court has decreed that the people of the Celestial Court must not interfere in the dispute between Myriad Immortal Alliance and Diyu. But, I've always been soft-hearted, and I can't bear to see the people being plunged into misery and suffering. I'm asking your highness in my own capacity, not as the celestial angel of the Celestial Court." With tears rolling down his cheeks, Lu Bang said in a hoarse voice, "Diyu, please withdraw your army. We can't fight anymore." Wu Qi's head was dizzy, and he nearly fell into the soup bowl in front of him. Chapter 692. Wu Qi's mind was buzzing. Lu Bang was crying and begging King Yang Chio to withdraw his troops. And in his own name? He couldn't bear to see the people being slaughtered and the people mourning, so he wanted King Yang Chio to withdraw his troops in his own name. Since when did Lu Bang become a compassionate man like a guardian angel? His own father was threatened to be chopped up and made into meat soup, but he still wanted a share of the soup. How could he pity those innocent people who were affected by the war between Diyu and Myriad Immortal Alliance? Well, even if Lu Bang had become a real compassionate man after spending more than 2,000 years practicing meditation and worshipping Buddha, did he have to act so strongly? Rolling and howling on the ground, disregarding his dignity. Wasn't that a trick only a shrew in the countryside could do? This guy must be plotting something. Wu Qi fixed his eyes on Lu Bang's face, not daring to ignore any subtle changes in his expression. This guy must be plotting something, and it was aimed at King Yang Chio. If this plot was really aimed at King Yang Chio, then Wu Qi was likely to be affected. How could Wu Qi let Lu Bang's plan succeed? With his legs dangling behind him and his arms wrapped around King Yang Chio's thigh, Lu Bang looked up at King Yang Chio and said affectionately, "Your Highness, you killed that beauty just now. Although you only killed her, I seem to see countless people wailing and dying in the flames of war. Do you know how many innocent people have been killed in the war between Yu and Myriad Immortal Alliance over the years? King Yangqiu narrowed his eyes and said nothing. How many people had been killed? Perhaps none of the officials in Yu could answer this question. There was no household registration system in Yu. Every 10 years, a local official would conduct a rough census of the local population. However, this census was only carried out in the towns and villages around the big cities. As for the villages in the wilderness or those built on newly developed lands, only God knew how many people lived in them. After fighting with the Union of 10,000 Immortals for several years, there must be a lot of Yu people who were accidentally killed, but how many? King Yangqiu shook his head. He could only vaguely remember that hundreds of large cities had been completely razed by the Alliance, and thousands of small and medium-sized cities had been breached by fiend immortals of the Alliance. All the people in these cities had their souls captured and made into fiend artifacts. As for how many of those small and medium towns were destroyed, he didn't care. He never cared about these small things. The number of Yu's people was so many that it was hundreds of millions of times more than the number of stars in the sky. Who would care about a few casualties? Shaking his head, King Yangqiu grabbed Lu Bang by the shoulder and threw him back to his seat, then gave a disgusted look at the tears, snot, and a large pool of saliva that Lu Bang had left on his robe. Annoyed, King Yangqiu stamped his foot, and the large piece of robe turned into ashes that drifted away. Only then did he say in a flat voice, "Is King of Han here to talk nonsense with me?" Lu Bang sprung to his feet. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he snapped, "What nonsense are you talking about? This concerns the life and death of countless people." Wu Qi shook his head. Lu Bang was really good at this. He could talk and shout at the same time, and at the same time, he could still shed tears. It was hard to believe that he could control his body at the same time. With a smile, Wu Qi turned to look at Zhang Liang and the others. Zhang Liang and Xiao He were drinking with their heads down, all their attention on the cups, while Han Xian was squinting at King Yangqiu's generals. To Wu Qi, Han Xian's eyes were like those of a perverted surgeon who was sizing up his dissected subjects. There was a calm madness in his eyes that made one feel uneasy, like a frozen flame. As for Fan Kuai, he seemed to be simply eating and drinking, his small eyes glancing at the bodies of the female cultivators who stood frozen in the hall from time to time. But, occasionally, he would roll his eyes and send a few cold and fierce glances at the guards in the hall. Judging from the way his muscles were twitching, he seemed to be ready to burst into action and rush out of the hall at any time. Sure enough, none of them were easy to deal with. Wu Qi snorted coldly. In front of everyone, he pulled out a few pieces of black bone from the sleeve of his battle robe and scratched them with his sharp nails, turning them into 5 little men. He smiled and nodded to Han Xian, then placed the 5 little people on the table in a row. Carefully, he cut his finger and drew a strange rune on the little people's chests with his blood. The faces of Zhang Liang, Xiao He, Han Xian, and Fan Kuai flickered slightly, and Han Xian and Fan Kuai straightened their bodies at the same time. On the other hand, a few heavily armored captains sitting next to Wu Qi nodded approvingly at him, then straightened their backs and gripped the weapons placed next to them. Because of Wu Qi's seemingly inconspicuous action, the hall suddenly became filled with a murderous aura. King Yangqiu looked down at the crowd and saw what they were doing. He nodded with a smile, then turned to Lu Bang and said, "You are not that kind of man." With tears in his eyes, Lu Bang looked at King Yangqiu and said, "That's exactly what I am. I really can't bear to see this." King Yangqiu raised a finger and said with a cold grin, "Stop acting and tell me the truth. Why are you here?" With a cold smile on his face, King Yangqiu said in a deep voice, "If you don't tell me what you're here for, I don't mind killing all of you here. He, the reason why you, Lu Bang, were able to get away from the banquet at Hongmen was that Xiang Yu was too stupid." Lu Bang, do you really think I'm a headstrong fool like Xiang Yu?" Wu Qi gently flicked the little man in front of him with his finger and said with a faint smile, "Your Excellency, you have a keen eye. I also think this man named Lu Bang is overacting. Well, Your Excellency, why don't we just kill them, extract their souls, and interrogate them about their purpose of coming here? I can also try to see if the spells I've been studying recently are really useful. King Yang Qiu gave Wu Qi an approving look. Just as he was about to speak, Yu Qingcheng, who had come to the Great Hall angrily to pick a fight with Wu Qi but had not had a chance to show off, rose to his feet. With a hint of arrogance and disdain, Yu Qingcheng glanced at Wu Qi, then clasped his hands behind his back and said with a graceful expression, "Your Excellency, King of Han is, after all, a special emissary of the Celestial Court. How can we kill him? No matter what King of Han's intention is, we can just ask him to explain it to us." Taking a deep breath, Yu Qingcheng pointed at Wu Qi and said with a cold grin, "Tan Lang, as His Excellency's personal guard, who gave you the courage to openly threaten the Celestial Ambassador? What are you waiting for? Destroy those 5 puppets." Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and smiled, but he did not say a word. Who gave him the courage to do that? Isn't it King Yang Qiu? When Lu Bang smeared his snot and tears on King Yang Qiu just now, King Yang Qiu wished he could kill Lu Bang with a punch. Yu Qingcheng, you are the master of Yu Academy and the first great editor of Great Yen. How can you not see this? Lightly flicking the 5 little puppets with his fingers, Wu Qi gave Yu Qingcheng a smile. Suddenly, a wisp of black smoke rushed out of his fingertip and disappeared into the body of one of the puppets. Zhang Liang gave a muffled snort as the black smoke on his face grew even stronger. In the blink of an eye, his face had turned pitch black, as if black blood was dripping out of his pores. With a furious roar, he hurriedly swallowed an immortal pill to protect his heart meridian, then flicked his wrist and shot a beam of starlight toward Wu Qi. One of the generals next to Wu Qi laughed wildly as he produced a large shield, 1 foot and 2 inches thick, and placed it in front of Wu Qi. The starlight hit the shield, but it only produced a plume of smoke and did not leave a mark on it. Only when the starlight returned did everyone see that it was a small flying dagger the size of a fingernail and shaped like a crescent moon. Xiao He, Han Xian, and Fan Kuai leaped out at the same time, but King Yang Qiu's subordinates, hundreds of military officers and oracles, as well as hundreds of longbow men standing at the foot of the wall, had surrounded them. There was no time for them to attack. Numerous talismans lit up over the hall, and a terrible pressure fell from the sky, preventing Xiao He and the others from moving. Yu Qingcheng's face flickered between pale and blue as he stared at Wu Qi and snapped in a low voice, How audacious of you! Do you want His Excellency to bear the name of disloyalty?" King Yang Qiu did not answer. Staring coldly at Yu Qingcheng, Wu Qi snapped, "What do you mean by disloyalty?" Tan Lang knew that only by killing their enemies could the wild beasts in the mountains survive and occupy the vaster hunting grounds. This Lu Bang is obviously a treacherous man. Disregarding his status, he cried out loud, and it is clear that he is plotting against His Excellency. As His Excellency's advisor, instead of thinking of a way to deal with him, old Mr. Yu is speaking up for an outsider. "He, do you think you are very righteous?" Lu Bang's tears magically disappeared. Looking curiously at Wu Qi, he nodded and said, "This fellow seems to know me very well. TSK, now that King Yang Qiu has an unreasonable character like you working for him, he will be even more difficult to deal with in the future." Laughing strangely, Lu Bang turned to King Yang Qiu, cupped his fist, and said, "I'm talking about a piece of top-secret information. I wonder what price King Yang Qiu is willing to pay for it." King Yang Qiu's expression remained unchanged as he said in a deep voice, "Tell me first, and I'll see how much it's worth." With a wry smile, Lu Bang cursed in a low voice, "Initially, I wanted to pretend to be compassionate, saying that I want to end this war and put out the flames of war for the benefit of the common people. That's why I betrayed the sovereign's latest move and killed him. But, Your Excellency didn't fall for it, so there's nothing I can do." Shaking his head and sighing for a while, Lu Bang said frankly, "I'll provide you with the sovereign's movements for the next month, and Your Excellency will send someone to kill him as soon as possible, so that the sovereign's position in the Celestial Court can be vacated, and I can place my own men in there. What do you think of this deal, Your Excellency?" Lu Bang stopped crying and acting. The rascality in his bones was too much for everyone to bear, and they could not help but shudder. As the celestial ambassador of the celestial court, the king of Han conferred by the celestial court, he had openly hired a murderer to kill someone. Lightly tapping the table with his finger, King Yang Qiu said in a cold voice, "I want to know the specific position of the sovereign in the celestial court." The sovereign of the Myriad Immortal Alliance, Immortal Ding Jun, is in charge of 50% of the pill workshops in the celestial court, Lu Bang said neatly. His eldest disciple, Marshal Lu Peng, is in charge of one of the 8 armies of the celestial river. His second disciple, Immortal Fire Virtue, is in charge of one of the 5 armies of the Great Fire Division in the celestial court, and his third disciple, Immortal Enlightenment, is the former general of the Great Celestial Emperor, and has a personal army of 120,000 soldiers under his command. Exclamations rang out in the Great Hall. King Yang Qiu's eyes flickered as he gritted his teeth and said, "No wonder the Myriad Immortal Alliance has grown so fast, and no wonder the attitude of the celestial court toward it is ambiguous." This, Wu Qi frowned. Was Lu Bang's intention really that simple? Chapter 693. Myriad Immortal Alliance was plunged into chaos because of King Yang Qiu's father, King Yang Shan. King Yang Shan served as a military counselor in De Yu's imperial court, roughly equivalent to the Minister of Defense or the Grand Council. He was a staunch anti-immortal, and he devoted all his energy and pursuits to the great cause of conquering the immortals on Panga continent. Annihilating the immortals, conquering the outer heavenly realms, capturing the celestial court, knocking all the emperors of the celestial court off their thrones, and stepping on 10,000 feet so that these lofty immortals would never rise again. This was what King Yang Shan had taught his children since they were young. Therefore, a few years ago, King Yang Shan had set up an ambush with his fierce generals and several supreme oracles, severely wounding the sovereign of Myriad Immortal Alliance, and injuring his immortal soul, putting him at risk of death. The elders of Myriad Immortal Alliance's Divine Hall were also seriously injured. More than 60% of the elders were seriously injured, and several of them were on the verge of death. Myriad Immortal Alliance had suffered such a heavy blow, so it was only natural for them to retaliate. Just like King Yang Shan's extreme hatred for immortals, there were extremists among the immortals as well, especially the Myriad Immortal Alliance, whose purpose was to conquer Panga continent and turn the fertile land into a paradise for immortals. Everything on Panga continent should be controlled by immortals. Every flower, every grass, every insect, every fish, even every immortal stone, energy stone, or even the most inconspicuous metal or should be used by immortals to improve their cultivation base and the Tao. In the eyes of those immortals, the mortals who now had the right to rule Panga continent should become their slaves and be driven by them forever. Therefore, taking advantage of the fact that Immortal Ding Jun was severely wounded, the radical immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance retaliated on a large scale. They destroyed hundreds of poorly defended cities in De Yu with the Art of Stars, and then triggered a series of wars. The flames of war broke out everywhere on Panga continent, and the common people were caught in the fierce battles. Countless people were killed or wounded by accident. This was the cause and effect of the war between De Yu and the union of 10,000 immortals described by Lu Bang. According to Lu Bang's analysis, Immortal Ding Jun was the spiritual leader of the union of 10,000 immortals, and also the source of the rapid development of the union of 10,000 immortals. Without Immortal Ding Jun, the union of 10,000 immortals would be like a group of dragons without a leader, and their combat effectiveness would suddenly drop several times. At the same time, without Immortal Ding Jun, the immortals of the union of 10,000 immortals would not be able to provide him with the astronomical number of immortal pills made by the celestial court, and the ability of the union of 10,000 immortals to sustain the war would also plummet. More importantly, without Immortal Ding Jun's control, his 3 disciples, who held great power in the celestial court, would no longer be able to provide any protection to the union of 10,000 immortals, and the celestial court's attitude toward the union of 10,000 immortals would also undergo a subtle change. Of course, the most important factor was Lu Bang. As long as King Yang Qiu could gather people to assassinate Immortal Ding Jun, Lu Bang would be able to let his trusted subordinates take over Immortal Ding Jun's power. At that time, Lu Bang would be able to use the resources and power in his hands to influence the decisions of the celestial court. When the union of 10,000 immortals lost the faint support of the celestial court, wouldn't it be a piece of cake for you to wipe out the union of 10,000 immortals? In fact, if it were not for immortal Ding Jun's help behind the scenes, wouldn't it be a piece of cake for your highness to crack the formation in front of you? After rambling on and on, Lu Bang finally pointed out the biggest problem that King Yang Qiu was facing. King Yang Qiu gave Wu Qi a quick glance, and Wu Qi nodded slightly. Even an idiot could figure out that without the help of someone from the celestial court, how could the formation constructed by Lord Wandering Immortal condense the true form of a celestial lord? How could it possess the divine power of a celestial lord? It was clear that someone from the celestial court had deliberately taken care of Lord Wandering Immortal, and that was why they had constructed such a formation that even Wu Qi found tricky. If, as Lu Bang had said, he could replace immortal Ding Jun in the celestial court and eliminate the intentional or unintentional support of the celestial court for the union of 10,000 immortals, the union of 10,000 immortals would be a piece of cake. King Yang Qiu pondered for a moment, then suddenly clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Good, good, good. King of Han, Lu Bang, you really have a sharp tongue. Someone, send these girls to King of Han's chariot." "Hey!" Staring fixedly at Lu Bang, King Yang Qiu cried out in a deep voice, "King of Han, you'd better remember your promise." With a smile on his face, Lu Bang cupped his fist at King Yang Qiu, then handed him a pale purple jade pendant. King Yang Qiu grabbed the jade pendant and probed it with his divine sense, then crushed it to pieces. Waving his hand, he cried out, "Open the front door and send our guests off." The tense atmosphere in the great hall eased abruptly. King Yang Qiu's subordinates slowly retreated, and the siege that had been suppressing Han Xin and the others was instantly disintegrated. Smiling, Wu Qi crushed the 5 puppets on the table with a flick of his finger, then rose to his feet and followed King Yang Qiu to send Lu Bang and the others off. The banquet ended hastily, but King Yang Qiu was clearly in high spirits, and Lu Bang was also overjoyed. There was no sign of dissatisfaction on his face. Hundreds of beautiful female cultivators and immortals, whose clothes were barely covering their bodies, were escorted into Lu Bang's chariot by a large group of soldiers. While chatting perfunctorily with King Yang Qiu, Lu Bang kept peeping at their swaying buttocks and swaying thighs. These beautiful female cultivators and immortals made Lu Bang overjoyed, and his mind was no longer on King Yang Qiu. Drums and trumpets filled the air, and flags fluttered in the wind as a group of people escorted Lu Bang and the others into the chariot. Almost at the same time, Lu Bang and the others turned to look at Wu Qi. Especially Zhang Liang, who had been struck by Wu Qi with a curse technique. With a cold face, he nodded at Wu Qi and said, "If there's a chance, I hope General can teach me a thing or two." With a faint smile on his face, Wu Qi cupped his fist at Zhang Liang and said nothing. Squinting at Zhang Liang, he suddenly remembered Zhang Liang's background. Was his master called Old Man Huang Shi? His master came from the Immortal League, so it was no wonder they were now subordinates of the Celestial Court. Wu Qi had vaguely figured out the ins and outs of what had happened in those years, and he just hoped to get the evidence from King Yang Qiu. Perhaps, by following King Yang Qiu's lead, Wu Qi could go back to Earth. Even though his foundation was now on Panga continent, and his lovers and friends were all there, he still had to go back to Earth. How could he face his master and brothers, who had died tragically, if he did not raze Green City to the ground? The female cultivators and immortals entered the chariot one after another. Those who could cultivate and become immortals were not fools. Since Lu Bang was conferred the title of King of Han by the Celestial Court, it was better to go with him than to be King Yang Qiu's captive. King Yang Qiu treated them like playthings, and many of the captured cultivators and immortals were either raped to death or sold to other powerful nobles in Great Yu. None of them had a good end. Staying with Lu Bang, even as his concubines, was better than being tortured to death in King Yang Qiu's hands. Looking at the girls entering the chariot, Lu Bang could not help but burst out laughing. Complacently, he said a few more meaningless words to King Yang Qiu, then waved his hand and said, "Let's go, Li Yang. Well, it's a long way back to Liangzhu, so you'd better keep your spirits up." Sitting in Lu Bang's chariot was none other than Reverend Li Yang of Green City. Upon hearing Lu Bang's order, Reverend Li Yang bowed respectfully, looking even more submissive than a servant. Wu Qi gave him an indifferent glance. He did not understand what was wrong with Reverend Li Yang. What was the benefit of being Lu Bang's chariot's driver? Lu Bang's chariot slowly flew up amidst the faint clouds and mist. With his hands clasped behind his back, King Yang Qiu wished him a pleasant journey in a loud voice. The generals and oracles around King Yang Qiu smiled with relief. With Lu Bang and his unwelcome guests gone, everyone felt relieved. Suddenly, Wu Qi's heart began to race violently. His skin tensed up, and his face turned deathly pale in an instant. Almost subconsciously, Wu Qi took a step to the side. Amidst the clouds in the far distance, a golden gleam flickered, as an arrow, 6 feet long and as thick as a thumb, forged from a golden alloy, shot through the air soundlessly, leaving a trail of golden light that stretched 1,000 feet long. It brushed past Wu Qi's shoulder. The shaft of the strange-shaped arrow was shaped like a wave of water, and its surface was engraved with countless tiny water patterns. Complicated runes were drawn on the shaft using thin threads made of unknown pale red crystals. As the arrow flew past Wu Qi, he smelled a warm, sweet aroma. The arrow was poisonous, and it was an extremely insidious, slow-acting poison. A miserable howl rang out as the arrow brushed past Wu Qi's body and hit a disciple of Yu Academy standing behind him. Blood spattered as the arrow pierced through the tall, handsome young man's chest. His body swayed a little, and then he fell to the ground like a man made of sand, turning into a pool of blood and minced meat. The arrow's momentum did not dissipate. After piercing through the man's body, it continued to fly backward. Another disciple of Yu Academy and 2 oracles under King Yang Qiu's command were pierced by the arrow, and like the first man, they all fell to the ground in pieces. In the end, the arrow flew in front of a heavily armored general. The general cried out in surprise and firmly caught the arrow with both hands. A shrill screech rang out as the general lost his balance and was pushed back by the tremendous force carried by the arrow. At last, he bumped into a longbow man, who reached out and pressed his hands on the general's shoulders. A muffled thud rang out, and the longbow man was also pushed back 3 steps by the tremendous force. Only then did the 2 men join forces and completely neutralize the force of the arrow. Amidst a cracking sound, the general separated his hands, and the arrow fell onto the cloud platform. Raising his stiff palms, the general said in a deep voice to King Yang Qiu, whose face was unsightly, "Your Excellency, all the bones in my palms are shattered. This is the bear-slaughtering arrow, a secret weapon of the Celestial Court." The bear-slaughtering arrow was a weapon specially crafted by the expert craftsmen of the Celestial Court, specifically made to counter the body-tempering technique used by high-level generals of Diyu, such as the true body of heaven and earth. The Yellow Emperor Xianyuan, one of the ancestors of the human race, was born in the Yuxiong Plain, where the capital city of Diyu, Liangzhu, was located. There were bears. Therefore, the secret weapon of the Celestial Court was called the bear-slaughtering arrow, and the meaning behind it was obvious. With a livid face, King Yang Qiu turned to look in the direction where the arrow came from, where Wu Qi had been peeping at the formation just now. Gnashing his teeth, he growled in a low voice, "Lord Wandering Immortal, I can't believe they have bear-slaughtering arrows. It seems that Lu Bang is telling the truth." Wu Qi frowned and said nothing. King Yang Qiu had put the blame on Lord Wandering Immortal, and Wu Qi felt that it should be done by the people of Myriad Immortal Alliance. But, their target was not King Yang Qiu, but Wu Qi himself. It was an assassination aimed at Wu Qi himself. Chapter 694. But, the Gourd Immortal Market was a special case. It had been in operation for hundreds of years, and the officials of Diyu had never discovered its existence. This proved that the person behind it had a very strong background and ability to ensure its safety. So, why was there no cave abode with immortal veins that was also absolutely safe? Wu Qi bowed and replied, "I'll do my best." Yu Qingqing's face twitched slightly. He gave Wu Qi a sarcastic glance but did not say anything. Yu Qingqing's eyes wandered, and no one knew what he was thinking. Nodding with satisfaction, King Yang Qiu turned to Wu Qi and cried out, Tan Lang, what is the strongest formation you can lay out in that catalogue of formations? If I ask you to lay out a formation to deceive people, and then lay out another formation to trap and kill people, how many gold immortals can you deal with? The head of Mingli, which Wu Qi had given to Bo Yunting, had been sent to Liangzhu by King Yang Qiu through the most urgent channel. Unfortunately, spirit herbs were hard to come by, and Pangu continent was Dayu's territory. So, after years of effort, there were still dozens of spirit herbs that had not been collected. But, those spirit herbs were not important. As long as the spirit liquid made from the internal organs of dragon pythons of fire and ice was used as medicine, the sovereign could still be cured. It was for his father that Li Qinghua, the sovereign of Myriad Immortal Alliance, tried to capture Goldhorn and Silverhorn alive. As a result, he ended up in a sorry state. But, this time, the Alliance had found a pair of dragon pythons of fire and ice somewhere on Pangu continent. They were the sovereign's last hope to save his life. The dozen or so generals and oracles in the Great Hall laughed in a deep voice at the same time. Myriad Immortal Alliance had defeated Dayu. How was that even possible? Only those who were in the core of Dayu knew how terrible the latent power of Dayu was. Now, in order to deal with the union of 10,000 immortals, the power that was exposed was not even a drop in the bucket. If it weren't for the fact that Dayu had been peaceful for a long time, more than 30 generations of human emperors had not experienced any major upheavals and changes before the current one, the entire Dayu was like a pool of stagnant water. All aspects of its functions were a bit old and solidified, so it couldn't summon too strong a force to launch an attack on the union of 10,000 immortals. At the same time, it was also because the real top existences like Dayu either retired or wandered around the world. The existing supreme priests were also unwilling to make a move against the younger generation of the union of 10,000 immortals because of their identity. Otherwise, the union of 10,000 immortals would have been crushed to pieces. How many golden immortals did he have to deal with? Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then cupped his fist and said, If your excellency can provide us with enough materials for the formation, weapons of slaughter, and all kinds of vicious and poisonous things, I dare not say much, but if less than 100 gold immortals dare to enter the formation, as long as your excellency sends a troop of soldiers to ambush them, they will all be killed. At the thought of the significance of this cave abode, Chief Wandering Immortal could not help but feel his blood rushing to the top of his head, making him feel hot all over, as if he could fly away with the wind at any time. Even if I don't care about it for myself, I should do it for my descendants, right? He had to get this cave abode, and he had to kill this lucky guard who served King Yang Qiu at all costs. Standing on the top of a mountain, Chief Wandering Immortal stared blankly at Wu Qi as he said in a deep voice, This guy is not easy to deal with. I've got to think of another way to kill him. He did not care about the energy stones and immortal stones offered by Immortal Gourd, for he did not care about such a small profit. But, the person who offered the reward had sworn to a safe and secret immortal cave abode was a resource that Chief Wandering Immortal desperately desired. The high-spirited King Yang Qiu told Wu Qi and others the top-secret information that Liu Bang had sent him. He had given orders to everyone, and the most important person in the plan to kill the sovereign was, of course, Wu Qi. Clenching his fists confidently, King Yang Qiu said with a cold grin, Now that my army is strong, the rebels of Myriad Immortal Alliance have no choice but to collude with itinerant cultivators and itinerant immortals, taking advantage of the terrain to lay out all kinds of formations and put up a desperate resistance. Clearly, the downfall of the alliance is imminent. The reason why they are still so determined to fight against Dayu is that they still have the hope that the sovereign can lead them to defeat me, Dayu. That assassin just now must be the provocation of Chief Wandering Immortal. Just ignore him. Frowning, King Yang Qiu said coolly, After we kill the sovereign of Myriad Immortal Alliance, the Wandering Immortal Hall, the Ascending Immortal Hall, the Hermit Immortal Hall, and the Divine Immortal Hall will be wiped out one by one. The divine sense of an immortal could lock onto an enemy from hundreds of millions of miles away. The bear slaughtering arrow was a fierce weapon secretly crafted by the master craftsman of the celestial court. It was said that any target locked onto by the divine sense could be killed in a flash. In other words, a bear slaughtering arrow could hit its target from a distance of 10 miles or even 100 miles. If the target was tens of thousands of miles away, or even billions of miles away, the divine sense could lock onto the target, and the arrow would definitely hit its target. The current Diyu was like a bottomless pool. It looked lifeless like a pool of stagnant water, but once it was disturbed, the waves it set off were strong enough to engulf everything. Therefore, Yu Qingcheng and the others did not take King Yangqiu's teasing words seriously. King Yangqiu nodded slowly when he heard Wu Qi say that they had not found any trace of the assassin. Those who could use the bear-slaughtering arrow on Pangu continent were not ordinary immortals, and there must be the power of the celestial court behind them. King Yangqiu did not expect to catch the assassin. He was just trying to show his attitude. Yu Qingqing smiled faintly, shook his head contemptuously, and gave Wu Qi a sideways glance. King Yangqiu was very satisfied with Wu Qi's answer. He clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Excellent. That's it. Oh, whatever you want, just take it from the armory. However, this king wants you to wholeheartedly set up the strongest killing array. Can you do that?" Back in the Great Hall, Wu Qi told King Yangqiu about the result of the search he had just led. Does a mere immortal Ding Jun, the sovereign of Myriad Immortal Alliance, really think he can turn the world upside down? King Yangqiu's mind was now fully focused on the top-secret information provided by Liu Bang just now. He dismissed more than 90% of the people in the Great Hall, leaving only Yu Qingcheng, Wu Qi, and a dozen generals and oracles in the hall. The heavy stone door slowly closed, and countless huge runes flowed down from the ceiling, turning the whole Great Hall into an isolated space. The people of Myriad Immortal Alliance and even other ordinary itinerant cultivators knew that the government of Diyu had a copy of the Pangu's map, which could monitor any energy veins on Pangu continent. Therefore, anyone who dared to open up a cultivation base in an immortal vein or cave abode would be forcefully suppressed and wiped out by the government of Diyu. Liang Zhu had already made arrangements to deal with what the Buddhist League cultivators had done on Pangu continent. Now, Wu Qi did not need to worry about the Buddhist League's revenge on his territory. 3 months later, the sovereign would bring a group of elders from Divine Hall and gold immortals from Hidden Immortal Hall to a perilous place on Pangu continent to hunt down a pair of dragon pythons of fire and ice, then extract their internal organs and concoct them into spirit liquid to be used in medicine. The sovereign was ambushed and seriously wounded by King Yangqiu's father. If he could not be treated with spirit herbs, his immortal soul would dissipate, his immortal body would disintegrate, and eventually, his soul would vanish. King Yangqiu cleared his throat. Tapping the armrest of his throne, he said coolly, "But, he is, after all, the sovereign of Myriad Immortal Alliance. If we can kill him and completely wipe out the union of 10,000 immortals, this would be a great credit. His Majesty is furious because of what happened to Left Minister Go Guang, and it has been recorded in Myriad Immortal Alliance. If I wipe out Myriad Immortal Alliance." For so many years, no one had ever heard of anyone who could escape from the target of a bear-slaying arrow. Therefore, when the arrow killed the 2 generals and 2 oracles behind Wu Qi, everyone thought that the target was one of them, and no one suspected that it was actually Wu Qi. After searching for a while in the cloud, they could not find any clues. Left with no choice, they glared down at the valley not far away, cursed and growled for a while, then returned to the Great Hall to report the situation to King Yangqiu. Slapping the armrest with both hands, King Yangqiu gritted his teeth and said, "My title of nobility will be promoted to a higher rank, and all of you will be conferred the title of Marquis." While Wu Qi was furious about who was trying to assassinate him with such a vicious weapon, all the immortals in the valley, including the Lord of Wandering Immortal Hall, were struck dumb. When Wu Qi and hundreds of soldiers were searching through the clouds, they all saw Wu Qi's face clearly. Tan Lang, the general whom King Yangqiu had just recruited, was not killed by the bear-slaying arrow. All the generals and oracles in the Great Hall cupped their fists and bowed to King Yangqiu at the same time as they cried out, "We're willing to die for your highness." King Yangqiu slapped the armrest of his throne and cried out in a deep voice, "That's great. Let's lay in ambush and kill immortal Ding Jun with all our might." With hundreds of heavily armored soldiers, Wu Qi searched the airspace where the bear-slaying arrow had been shot for a long time, but apart from a faint fluctuation of immortal energy, he did not see even a shadow. The airspace was at the edge of the formation laid out by Myriad Immortal Alliance. Presumably, someone from the Alliance had sneaked out of the formation and shot the arrow at Wu Qi while hiding in the clouds. In any case, the plan says that all these people have to go to the 8 Treasures Lotus Throne. Anyway, let them all die. Glancing at the many allies standing around him, the Lord of Wandering Immortal Hall laughed grimly, then waved his hand and transformed into a gust of wind, flying back to the pool in the middle of the valley. A sheet of rainbow light soared into the sky, and 2 streams of clear air shaped like Ganoderma Rui flew whistling into the sky, but were quickly suppressed by the light and pushed back into the pool. Even with Lord Wandering Immortal's status in Myriad Immortal Alliance, he only had 3 bear-slaying arrows with him. Over the years, he had used them to kill 2 of Deyu's generals. Every time, it was a one-hit kill. Furthermore, the arrows didn't just kill the enemies they were dealing with. Even the people around the 2 generals were killed. But today, the last bear-slaying arrow did not hurt Wu Qi at all. Wu Qi bowed and thanked King Yang Qiu, then walked out of the Great Hall to prepare for the deadly formation. On Panga continent, there was a cave abode with an immortal vein that was not known by the officials of Deyu. Myriad Immortal Alliance had once offered an astronomical reward for all kinds of spirit herbs in order to concoct them to cure the sovereign. In order to appease Wu Qi, while everyone was busy working, King Yang Qiu gave Wu Qi a message. Set up the formation and kill the sovereign in the place where the dragon pythons of fire and ice live. After doing some calculations on his fingers, Wu Qi added, but it will take at least a month or 2 to set up such a ferocious formation. And I will need your highness to send a large number of people to help me. Otherwise, how could I possibly set up such a formation without a few years? Chapter 695. Panga continent was constantly absorbing the chaotic energy from outer heavenly realms, and it was constantly expanding at a rapid pace. It was said that when the great Saint Pangu split his body to form Panga continent, it would expand by 1 centimeter in a day and a night. But, after countless eons, as the surface area of Panga continent grew larger and larger, the chaotic energy it absorbed in a day and a night had allowed it to expand by 1,000,000 miles. If Panga continent was a disk, then its radius would increase by 1,000,000 miles in a day and a night. It was an extremely frightening concept. Every day, the land area of Panga continent would increase by the same amount as the land of dozens of provinces. Therefore, although Deyu was the lord of Panga continent, Deyu did not occupy the whole continent. The human emperor had decreed that all the people of Deyu had the natural duty to work hard to reproduce. To put it bluntly, the human emperor encouraged the people of Deyu to work hard to have babies, and the more, the better. The direct descendants of Deyu's aristocratic clans each had at least 30 to 50 wives and concubines, and at most, 300 to 500, or even more than 1,000 or 2,000 wives and concubines. Relying on their strong bodies, they sowed seeds every night, so the great clans of Deyu had a large number of members. Every 18 years, Deyu would form a group of descendants of the great clans and spread out in all directions with soldiers and people to build new provinces, counties, cities, and so on. Even so, Deyu's efforts could not keep up with the speed of growth of Panga continent. The edge of Panga continent was often uninhabited for tens of billions of miles, with only newly grown hills and mountains, and only the various flowers and trees with tenacious vitality that had covered them in a short time, as well as the various natural treasures that were produced directly from the chaos. Wu Qi and his company were now near such a mountain that had just been born 3 years ago. The mountain was very far away from Mingu province, where King Yang Qiu's army was stationed. Even if Wu Qi were to fly with all his might and run at full speed with the Quafu chasing the sun's step, it would take him at least 1,000 years to reach the edge of Panga continent. Fortunately, King Yang Qiu was accompanied by Yu Gu, a supreme oracle. With the help of the Supreme Tower's ability to shatter the void, it only took them 3 days to get here. Looking into the distance, one could see the pitch-black sky and the twinkling stars in the distance. One could also see the thick, grayish-white, turbid spiritual qi in the sky. The murky energy was the legendary chaotic energy, which Pangu continent extracted directly from the surrounding sky and turned into its own mountains and rivers. Occasionally, the essence of chaotic energy would condense and transform into all kinds of spirit herbs that immortal cultivators dreamed of. Because it had only been formed for about 3 years, the weather within a radius of 10 billion kilometers around the mountain was extremely unstable. The seasons of spring, summer, autumn, and winter were not clearly distinguished here. At one moment, there would be thunderstorms, and in the next moment, heavy snow would fall. But, less than a quarter of an hour after the snow began to fall, hill-sized hailstones poured down from the sky accompanied by terrible rumbles. When he arrived here in Yugu's Supreme Tower, Wu Qi was hit by a terrible hail. Even though Wu Qi had seen a lot of things, and had seen countless frightening natural perilous situations up in the 9th heaven, he was still struck dumb and speechless by the sight of this huge hailstorm. Even the smallest hailstone had a diameter of around 1,000 feet. Although it was called hailstone, it was actually a highly condensed afterworld water element energy. Every hailstone was like a shooting star, falling from the sky with a long halo. Once it landed on the ground, it would immediately explode into huge mushroom clouds. It looked like millions of nuclear warheads had exploded on the ground at the same time, and the dreadful power caused the ground within a radius of 10 billion miles to shake violently. But, it was just a tremble. The rocks and soil of Pangu continent were extremely strong, especially this fresh land that had just been born from the chaos. It was so hard that even ordinary gold immortals could not shake it. Although the hailstones were very powerful, not even a stone fell from the mountains. Instead, when the hailstones exploded, they turned into a great amount of sticky, cold liquid that flowed in all directions, gushing down from the mountains and turning into countless waterfalls that rushed down to the ground like flying dragons. Each drop of the liquid weighed tens of thousands of kilograms, and when such a waterfall poured down from the peaks of the mountains, its power and force made even the few generals who had stepped into the realm of second Pangu heaven beside Wu Qi speechless, and they could not help but take a few steps back into the Supreme Tower. No wonder the human emperor has issued a ban. Unless the new land has been stabilized for more than 10,000 years, no one under the realm of second Pangu heaven of Diyu is allowed to approach it. One of the generals shook his head and exclaimed, "Without our overall strength, ordinary people will die if they are sucked into this waterfall." Wu Qi could not help but keep nodding his head. This damn place was indeed extremely frightening. But, it was also a supreme treasure trove. Rare acquired water element essence was rolling all over the ground. If he could form all kinds of Yin thunders and divine thunders of water element here, he would not have to worry about the lack of materials. Suddenly, Wu Qi's eyes lit up. On the top of the mountain, a spirit herb with 7 leaves and 21 greenish-blue fruits hanging on its single stem was bursting with a strong light. The spirit herb was like a black hole, sucking up all the liquid formed by the hailstones near the mountain. The blue color of the 21 fruits became stronger. After that, the spirit herb flickered, and before Wu Qi could reach out his hand to pluck the fruits, it had disappeared into the mountain, disappearing without a trace. Hiding in Wu Qi's ear, Ao Buzan sighed faintly and said, "What a treasure. It's a pity that I didn't get it." The supreme dark water essence fruit, also known as the water dragon fruit, is an innate spirit item. If an ordinary flood dragon eats it, he will immediately transform into a white dragon of water element and master the innate divine ability to control water. TSK, to dragons and flood dragons, this is a supreme treasure. Wu Qi's eyes brightened. He let out a great shout and spun his body like a spinning top, bringing up a strong stream of purple smoke as he darted out from the entrance of the Supreme Tower like a shooting star, throwing a heavy punch on the mountain. He was going to shatter the mountain and get that supreme dark water essence fruit. Crack! Wu Qi's fist smashed on the mountain, sending out large amounts of sparks. The mountain didn't change at all, but Wu Qi's wrist bone was broken into 2. Fortunately, the true body of heaven and earth scripture had a very strong self-healing ability. Wu Qi gasped, and his wrist bone quickly returned to normal. Damn it, what a hard rock. Wu Qi stared at the mountain in shock. How could this mountain be so hard? The few generals who had come with Wu Qi were delighted to see this. Imitating Wu Qi, they leaped into the air and smashed the mountain with their fists. Miserable howls rang out incessantly. Although Wu Qi's wrist bone was broken, the group of generals, who had exerted all their strength and whose cultivation bases were above the 7 stars realm of the second Panga heaven, who were strong enough to fight against 4th and 5th tier gold immortals, were all shattered from their fingers to their shoulder blades. The mountain, which had just formed from the chaos, was almost as strong as an innate spirit treasure. If it were a primordial immortal, he might be able to deal with it, but as for a gold immortal, it was better not to provoke him. Wu Qi looked at the generals, a little dumbfounded. The group of generals, who were all muscles and whose brains were almost replaced by muscles, were also looking at each other and laughing awkwardly. If word got out that they had injured themselves before even seeing the enemy, King Yang Qiu would definitely skin them alive. A light cough rang out as Yu Gu, clad in a long black robe and looking like a ghost, slowly walked out of the Supreme Tower. Yu Gu snorted coldly when he saw Wu Qi and the others giggling foolishly. What a bunch of kids you are. These are mountain bones that have just been formed from chaotic energy, innate mountain bones that have not been contaminated by acquired energy and acquired energy. Even a primordial immortal would have to spend a lot of effort to break them, and you kids. Shaking his head, Yu Gu sighed and said, I've seen fools, but I've never seen anyone as stupid as you. After scolding Wu Qi and the others, Yu Gu pointed at Wu Qi and shouted, Tan Lang, what formation are you going to construct? Do it now. My strength is not in formations, so I can't help you study the formation diagrams. But, if you need my help, I'll help you. Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed to Yu Gu, then said respectfully, Of course I'll need your help, Master Yu. Please show me your divine abilities when the time comes. King Yang Qiu wanted to kill the sovereign, and at the same time, he wanted to take the credit for himself, so he did not want to leak the information. Therefore, if he wanted to ambush and kill the sovereign, he could only rely on his own army. The best way to ambush a powerful enemy was to construct a formation and kill the enemy. But, except for Yu Qingcheng and his disciples, no one around King Yang Qiu knew anything about formations. Since King Yang Qiu did not want to use Yu Qingcheng, he had to leave the task to Wu Qi. As for Yu Gu, the Supreme Oracle, although he possessed a mighty cultivation base, what he studied in the Directorate of Celestials was all kinds of evil poisons and sinister curses. He had devoted all his energy to these 2 fields of study, and he knew nothing about the Tao of formations. Therefore, Wu Qi could not count on him for this. Wu Qi studied the terrain around the mountain, then looked into the distance for a while, and finally decided on a good place to construct the formation. It was a valley about 1,000 miles long and less than a mile wide, looking like a narrow slit from the sky. It went nearly 100 miles deep into the ground, and was densely filled with a sticky, heavy, black poisonous gas, the spirit-seizing black evil energy. This acquired murderous aura was extremely heavy, and if an immortal cultivator accidentally touched it, his Tao foundation would disintegrate and his immortal soul would vanish. Good place, it's indeed a good place. Wu Qi gave the valley a look, pointed his finger at it, and said with a smile, Now, we just need to deploy a small maze formation and a small killing formation in the valley. It will be best if they are simple formations that can be easily identified by others. They are the most suitable ones. After that, Wu Qi pointed to a stretch of rugged hills near the valley and said, The terrain here is complicated, and there are many holes and passages in the hills. It's the best place to construct our real formation. The enemy is very powerful, so we don't have to resort to any honorable means. Let's just use the myriad poisons formation. Although it's a little sinister, it's a good formation that can kill people. With a smile on his face, Wu Qi bowed to Yu Gu and said, Old man you can use all your poisonous items now. Yu Gu grinned and gave Wu Qi an appreciative pat on the shoulder. This kid is not bad, he knows how to construct a poison formation. Yu Gu shook his head proudly. To construct a poison formation, as a supreme oracle, the countless vicious and evil poisons I can't be left out. This is tantamount to giving more than half of the credit to Yu Gu. This kid is very good. Yu Gu also felt that King Yang Qiu had found a capable talent this time. Following the arrangement, the crowd began to move quickly. Chapter 696. After giving Yugu the formation diagram of the myriad poisons formation and a few other spare formations, and asking him to take the 3,000 soldiers who had come with him to lay out the foundations of the various formations, Wu Qi led 4 generals whose cultivation bases had reached the 9 stars realm of the second Panga heaven toward a mountain range in the distance. These 4 generals were King Yang Qiu's trusted confidants, and they had been his servants for generations. They were all cousins, and they had grown up with King Yang Qiu since childhood. They ate, drank, and drank together, and their relationship with King Yang Qiu was no different from that of real brothers. According to the unspoken rules of the imperial clan of Deyu, after King Yang Qiu was conferred the title of king, these 4 generals also took his title as their surnames. They were Yangqiu Fengbo, Yangqiu Yushi, Yangqiu Leilong, and Yangqiu Dianjiao. Fengbo, Yushi, Leilong, and Dianjiao were all gods, and they took the title of king as their surnames. In Deyu, as long as they announced their names, outsiders would immediately know their identities and their positions at King Yang Qiu's side. Unlike King Yang Qiu's cold and solemn character, these 4 brothers were like active volcanoes, and they would jump up and kill people at the slightest provocation. They were 4 real fierce beasts in human form. The 4 of them were in charge of King Yang Qiu's personal guards, and they were only responsible for his personal safety. According to Wu Qi, all their brain cells had been replaced by muscle fibers and plasma. Bringing the 4 ferocious beasts in human form, Wu Qi traveled across the true land of the great wilderness. Lightning bolts were twisting and flashing above his head from time to time, and he was surrounded by whistling storms. Carefully, he searched for a relatively safe passage between the mountains. This territory had only been born from the chaos for about 3 years, and the laws of heaven and earth had not yet stabilized. Thus, all kinds of natural disasters had emerged one after another, and a slight carelessness could cost them their lives. The group of people hurried between the mountains, occasionally leaping into the air and flying for a short distance. They traveled in this manner for more than 6 hours, passing through dozens of terrible natural disasters that suddenly erupted, avoiding the bombardment of dense hailstones and snowstorms that could freeze gold immortals to death, and luckily escaping the sudden eruption of an underground fire vein. Finally, the group of people arrived outside the valley at the core of the mountains. A dark cloud slowly rolled over from above his head, and hair-thin raindrops slowly drifted down from the sky. The raindrops were sparkling like crystals, and the semi-solid raindrops let out a silvery tinkling noise when they hit the ground, raising a large amount of cold mist that had a radius of a zhang. The strength of these raindrops was comparable to the arrows shot from the heavy crossbows specially made by Deyu, and the coldness contained in them was strong enough to freeze the souls of ordinary heaven immortals. Both the human emperor of Deyu and the great celestial emperor of the celestial court had decreed that no one was allowed to enter this land that had just been born from the chaos, unless they were upper-tier gold immortals or above, and had great confidence in their cultivation base and luck. Only after the land had cooled and solidified for tens of thousands of years, and when all the laws of the heavenly Tao had completely stabilized, would those with weaker cultivation bases be allowed to explore it. This was an absolutely dangerous place. But, both Deyu and the Celestial Court had very strong experts who came and went in this dangerous place, searching for the innate spirit creatures that were born from the chaos. If they found spirit herbs or rare innate ores, it would certainly be a huge fortune. But, if they were unlucky enough to run into the innate savage beasts that had just been born from the chaos and possessed strange and powerful abilities, they would have to pray for their own luck. In the past, a supreme oracle of Deyu had fallen in this place, and a primordial immortal expert of the Celestial Court had his immortal body destroyed and was forced to be reincarnated. This was a land of opportunity, but it was also a dangerous place. Some people could get rich overnight here, but others could be reduced to a pile of flesh and bones. Had it not been for Yangqiu Fengbo and his companions who had carefully protected Wu Qi all the way here, he would not have been able to come here safely unless he used an innate escape art. For example, if Wu Qi had used his fleshly body to block the hailstones that were raining down on him, he would have been smashed to a pulp. Panting, he climbed up a mountain that was about 100 miles high, and in front of him was a valley that was about 100 miles in circumference. The valley was shaped like the bottom of a bowl, about 100 miles in circumference, and about 10 miles deep at its deepest point. It was as smooth as a mirror, except for a natural yin and yang acupoint at its center. Like a Taiji diagram, there was a pool of freezing cold water in the center of the valley, and a volcanic crater with towering heat waves. The water eye and the fire eye formed a circle, from which cold and hot air soared up into the sky, intertwining into countless frost flakes and falling slowly down. What surprised Wuqi was that the mountain peaks surrounding the valley had formed into a natural defensive formation, hiding the wind and gathering the energies. The turbulent energies in the surroundings could not affect the water and fire holes in the valley, and the water and fire energies could not leak out of the valley, so they could only rush straight up into the sky. But, the water and fire energy had reached a balance, so when they rose about a mile into the sky, they would naturally turn into frost and water vapor and fall back to the ground. That way, they would not attract any terrible natural disasters from the outside world. What a great place! So the two dragon pythons of fire and ice are hiding here. Wuqi was struck dumb as he looked at the scene in the valley. He could not help but be amazed by the two dragon pythons mentioned in Lu Bang's intelligence report. They really knew how to find a good place. The water and fire acupoints were of great help to the dragon pythons, and they were much better than the place where Goldhorn and Silverhorn used to hide. What amazed Wuqi even more was that because of the two eyes acupoints, the valley was as warm as spring, and the natural energy was extremely abundant. In this untainted world of 10 billion miles in circumference, this small valley was actually rich in water and grass, and all kinds of natural resources. Surrounding the two eyes acupoints was a field of fine grass, about 3 feet tall and as fine as hair. There was no wind in the valley, but the grass was swaying even though there was no wind, as if an enchanting woman was dancing in the wind. In the midst of the fine grass, there were dense shrubs. These bushes all looked the same. They all had a main pole with 9 branches, and each branch bore a fruit the size of a fist. The bushes near the water's eye were a bluish-green color, and the fruits were a dark purple-blue color. The bushes near the flame were crimson in color, while the fruits were bright red like magma. Through the thin skin of the fruits, one could even see the crimson juice bubbling inside. Great Yang Yin dragon saliva fruit. Ao Buzan sighed faintly into Wuqi's ear and said, "These two beasts are very lucky. They are also spirit plants of heaven and earth, and are very beneficial to all flood dragons and dragon pythons. A ripe fruit can increase one's magical power by 10,000 years. No wonder they are hiding here. A fruit could increase one's magical power by 10,000 years." Wuqi scanned the valley with his divine will. There were a total of 108 great Yang Yin dragon saliva fruits, or 54 pairs. If all the fruits were ripe, wouldn't it increase the magical power of the two dragon pythons hiding here by about 30 periods? 30 periods? Wuqi could not help but breathe out a long sigh. How envious! What surprised Wuqi even more was that these 108 fruit trees actually formed a strange formation, which consisted of 12 primordial stars and 9 palaces embedded within each other. Inside the formation, the energies of water and fire intertwined like dragons and snakes. At first glance, the water and fire acupoints seemed to be right in front of one's eyes, but at the same time, they seemed to be far away. It turned out to be a natural formation mixed with the killing energies of ice and fire. With a formation to hide in, a water and fire acupoints to improve their cultivation base, and a spirit plant of heaven and earth to increase their magical power, these two dragon pythons were indeed very lucky. When he thought of the Goldhorn and Silverhorn brothers who lived in an immortal's mansion and could only gnaw on grass, how lucky were these two dragon pythons hiding here. This newly born primitive land was so vast, yet this small valley was only about 100 miles in circumference. Wuqi wondered how the people of Myriad Immortal Alliance could find these two dragon pythons. Was this the sovereign's luck, or his misfortune? Grinning coldly, Wuqi recalled the information provided by Lu Bang about the two dragon pythons. Their ferocious flames had devoured most of the dozen or so immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance who found them. After that, they hunted them for tens of thousands of miles, and only one gold immortal managed to escape with a wisp of his soul. When he returned to the Alliance's headquarters and reported the existence of the two dragon pythons, his soul was disintegrated and he died. That was what happened 7 days ago. Meanwhile, the sovereign of Myriad Immortal Alliance was recuperating with the help of a few elders of Divine Hall, and he would not be able to come out until 3 months later. Currently, the immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance had withered, and the few remaining immortals were pinned to various places in Diyu by the military of Diyu, making it difficult for them to mobilize powerful immortals to come here to hunt down the dragon pythons. Therefore, the sovereign had no choice but to come here with his personal guards. This was the best time to kill him. According to the information provided by Liu Bang, in order to save his life and stabilize his injury, the sovereign had used his authority to take out 360,000 supreme-grade gold immortal pills from the Celestial Court's immortal vault. Then, with the help of a few elders of Divine Hall, he had used the pills to lay out a strange formation and forcibly stabilized his immortal body and immortal soul. With such a huge consumption, the sovereign's injury would not worsen as long as he did not attack with all his strength. 360,000 supreme-grade gold immortal pills. Even Wu Qi was shocked when he heard the number. The sovereign was indeed a big shot who was in charge of 50% of the pill stores in the Celestial Court. How could he abuse his power for personal gain? Those were gold immortal pills, not heaven immortal pills. Just as he was marveling at the number of pills, a cold spring about 1,000 feet high suddenly sprayed out of the water, from which a silver dragon python, crystal clear and translucent, slowly flew out. Then, a scorching flame shot out of the eye as well, and a golden dragon python, also nearly transparent, flew out of it. The two dragon pythons chased and played in the air for a while, then twisted their bodies and transformed into two beautiful little girls, who hopped onto the grass. Laughing and joking, they chased and played on the grass, and occasionally punched and kicked each other, producing deafening booms that sounded like rumbling thunder. Tisk, two female pythons. Wu Qi's eyes darted back and forth for a while. With a serious face, he turned to the 4 Yangqiu Fengbo brothers and said, "What lovely little girls they are. How can we let them take them away to concoct medicine? Well, after we kill the sovereign, I'll plead with His Highness to adopt these 2 little girls. What do you think, brothers?" Yangqiu Dianjiao smacked his lips as he looked at the 2 little girls playing in the distance, then shook his head and said, "They look very thin." Yangqiu Leilong nodded and said, "They don't have any meat." Yangqiu Yushe shook his head and said, "That means they don't have anything to eat." Yangqiu Fengbo patted Wu Qi's shoulder generously and said, "Tan Lang, these 2 girls are yours." Well, they are neither delicious nor useful, so there's no point in using them. Cold sweat broke out of Wu Qi's back as he hurriedly thanked the 4 fellows whose brains had turned into muscles. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.